Good evening, everyone. Welcome back after the summer. If you would please stand for the pledge, and if you'd like to remain standing for the invocation.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pastor Clayton Wilfer from Joy Christian Community Church. Hi.
Hi. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for yesterday's rain, which has watered and renewed the earth. We ask for your presence here to renew the council as you have renewed the land. Give them strength and fortitude. Give them discernment and wisdom, grace and compassion as they lead this town. Guide their minds and hearts in making decisions that benefit the residents of Fountain Hills. And in all of this, we seek your spirit and your blessing. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. A roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Present.
Councilmember Pradell. Councilmember McMahon. Here. Councilmember Kalavianakis.
Here.
Councilmember Toth.
Here.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Here.
Anyone wishing to address the council regarding items listed on the agenda or under call to the public should fill out a request to comment card located in the back of the council chambers and hand it to the town clerk prior to consideration of that agenda item. When your name is called, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, and state your name for the public record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is the policy of the mayor and council to not comment on items brought forth under call to the public. However, staff can be directed to report back to the council at a future date or to schedule items raised for a future council agenda.
Thank you, Linda. Again, welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see you here tonight. We will start, as always, with our reports from mayor and council members and our town manager. Rachel?
All right, welcome back, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you. Good to see everybody here tonight. It's been a very busy summer. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of things that have been going on. I just thought I'd cover a few highlights that happened over the summer. First, I wanted to congratulate and welcome our new fire chief. Chief Ott was officially brought on board as a town staffer in July. So we're very excited. Kind of in conjunction with that, that means our process of bringing the fire department in-house is on track. We have been accepted into the Mesa Dispatch service, so that was a really big hurdle for us. So we're really excited about that. And we are on track, again, to begin that process and in-house that process the first of the year. We have a number of staff hires in the works as well. We have a number of commitments there, so everything's a go. So that's great. I also wanted to pause and thank our Rotary here in town. They did a partner project with us. You might have noticed a new banner holder in front of our community center, as well as down at the park at the end of the avenue. It's both functional and beautiful. It's a piece of art that actually is designed to hold our seasonal banners when we have events and programs and things going on. So we really appreciate their partnership and support. I wanted to give a shout out to our Community Services Department. They are at the Arizona Parks and Recreation Association Conference this week. Actually, this evening, they're going to be accepting 2 awards for our Spooky Blast event, as well as the new playground down at Fountain Park. So both of those were recognized as best program and best facility in the state this year. So that's pretty exciting. Lastly, I wanted to give an update on our MCSO contract. As many of you know, we have been in negotiations with MCSO since the beginning of the year, since January. Those negotiations stalled out around budget season. We were not able to kind of come to that conclusion there. So we do have a temporary contract in place till the end of the year. Knowing that we have a ticking clock, staff was pretty anxious to get the issues and disparities addressed. So we've been reaching out and working with a number of their staff at MCSO, and we've been moving up the ranks until we actually met with the sheriff at the sheriff's request. He asked to meet in person so that we could discuss some of the finer points of the contract. And at this point, the ball is in their court. We are waiting on an updated draft that reflects the changes that we have requested. So we're waiting on that, but we're hopeful that we can get that here and before council for discussion later this fall. Those are my updates.
So I'll take the same approach. It was a long summer, and I am so glad to be back, so I won't bore you with every single detail, but what I will just give a shout out for is that I had the privilege of attending a few business retention meetings over the summer, which were fantastic. I think that program or that initiative that Amanda's taken to rotate council members to speak with business owners has been a really fantastic way to learn about the needs here in town. On top of that, I was able to attend a policy retreat by the Morrison Institute about 2 weeks ago. And that was a very interesting event. Several topics covered. I feel as though I learned quite a bit from other local leaders in the area, and I will let everyone else fill you in on the rest of the summer.
Ditto what they said, keep it short. It was a long 2 months. We got a lot done, but what's really important for me to talk about today is Make a Difference Day is coming up on Saturday, October 21st. If you know someone that can benefit from the help on Make a Difference Day, we do still have a few slots available. The deadline for the residential projects is Thursday, August 31st. They can contact Kim Wickland in our Community Services Department, but I would suggest they not contact her in the next day or so because she's probably, wait till next week, but we are still accepting applications. They can, of course, shoot her an email and let her know that they're interested. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to request a personal point of privilege. I have several questions and comments related to the MCSO contract in this town. First of all, I don't know who set that meeting up. I want to know why I wasn't there as a senior council member on this dais, also involved with pushing for the review of that contract and the matrix consultation on that contract. I think I should have had a seat at that table for any negotiations going on with that contract for this town and the residents. We are extensions of every resident in this town. We are here to represent these residents fairly in any contract negotiation with any agency that we have a contract with. All I can say is, I'm gonna start on my list of things, the communications with MCSO, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this point. I am not disparaging any local deputies or command staff that represent and work in our town. This has nothing to do with them. This has to do with the staff down in Phoenix, and it comes from the top down. And I'm not here to negotiate this contract today, but I have several items I want to bring up so that everybody is aware of what's going on here. The communication with that agency has been, I would grade that an F at best. We have been struggling with them through the audit or review. Matrix Consulting had trouble getting information from them. We've had trouble with this town. We're on a month-to-month contract since January of this year. That's bad. We're not getting things in a timely fashion from them. We got nothing we needed in this proposed contract. And I would go as far as to say that if any council member sitting up here approves this contract in its present form, we're not doing our job for our residents. We are still District 7, which encompasses Rio Verde and Town Verde. How long are we going to be on the hook to pay for those towns with police coverage? They're growing up there. They're going to have more need and more calls. There's going to be more incidents, accidents, and reporting. And for them to take staff from
Can I ask Aaron a question, please? And sorry to interrupt, but is this in order to do this? Because we are in the middle of these negotiations and nothing has been settled, and I don't know that we should be having this. discussion.
You know what?
Because people don't know that we're going to
This is my personal point of privilege, and I remember you giving Allen Magazine time to sit up here and bluster about George Soros and being attacked by the right-wing left or right-wing people as well.
Okay, we were talking about the Holocaust and something else. You're talking about something that
I'm talking about something that's related to this town, Mayor, and it's important for people in this town to know what's going on here.
But this is just your opinion of what's going on.
No, it's the
here.
facts.
You can continue, but I think this is out of order.
From what I understand, we will have no detectives in this town. Why is that? If we're their biggest contract, nobody's asking you for your opinion. You are not recognized, Councilwoman. Will you please let me finish? We have there'll be no detectives in Fountain Hills. Why is that? We're their biggest contract. Why won't we have a detective warehoused here in Fountain Hills? What about the results of that audit and the dollars that are owed to this town? They increased the cost of this contract. This is all public information, Jenny.
I just don't know that this is okay to be doing right now. I'm relying right now on Aaron.
They increased the cost of this contract by 19%, but they give us a credit. We're paying for our own credit on this contract. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't fairly represent what these citizens in this town need to have here.
Aaron, please.
Mayor and council, I can appreciate that there are strong feelings, clearly, on both sides. And I think I can speak both hand in hand with interim manager Goodwin, that we're at a spot where we are continuing to negotiate the terms of a contract. In terms of what Councilman Friedel said, I don't think we're actively negotiating anything here today, and you referenced that yourself. Your points are well taken. To the extent we're able to continue to communicate those, staff works to be able to do so. My recommendation in terms of this council meeting would be, Councilman, if you're nearing the end, to wrap that, and then the mayor, as the chair, can respond to the point of personal privilege.
I have a couple more points. We spent hundreds of hours in staff time with the audit or review and the matrix consulting report. We had former council member David Spellich spent a lot of time coming up with suggestions for this contract, which make perfect sense for this town and representing this town. The cost of that contract review and the matrix advice was close to $100,000. Are we just going to walk away from that? We've got a lot of money and time and staff time invested in this contract, and I think it's important that we go to the table. And in fact, there were two councilwomen sitting up here on this dais that made a promise to Councilman Spellich that they would see this through to the end. Was that just lip service? I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not doing my activities quite yet, but I just want to mention that nobody has seen a contract yet for this year. That's why we're in an extension of last year's until we get to the maybe sooner, but the end of the year. I have many meetings that many people don't attend, including I've had private meetings with several of the things that we're involved with. In this case, I did ask the vice mayor to come, and I asked Councilwoman Calavianakis to come because she had also had familiarity with it, just as you did, and she did, and we had a lot of conversation. And when we bring back what hopefully will be what they bring back to us, that will be for the entire council to see and to look at and to approve or disapprove. But the things that you're saying now, I'll just caution, they're not to be taken as things that are happening right now or that will be in the future contract. And I have every right to meet, and I do, like I say, all the time with mayors, with the governor's office, Secretary of State, and with the sheriff. And I'll continue to do that and invite who I think is effective to be there with me at the time. And that's what I did.
Mayor, Brenda, no offense to you, Councilwoman Brenda. She's been on the job 7 months. I've been here over 2.5 years. This just seems, and it kind of stinks of political partisanship. And I don't like it. The town's got to be fairly represented, and I'll leave it at that.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to celebrating our summer. I had a great summer. I hope you did too. I wanted to update everybody on our dementia-friendly initiatives. They're moving along really well. Our Memory Cafe is really a success. We're providing great support and education for people, for our community with suffering from dementia and also their caregivers. Also, I attended a board meeting for Valley Metro, and we are really, really excited that Governor Hobbs signed the Proposition 400 so that it is going to be put before the voters next year in the election. And what Proposition 400 is, it is merely an extension of prior Prop 400s that have been in effect since 1985, I think it is, for a half-a-cent tax. There's not any change or anything, and it is for our streets and infrastructure, and it is going to bring in billions of dollars a year and help businesses and new businesses in Phoenix and all around. Also, this Friday evening, there's a ribbon cutting for the new high school Falcon football field, and I hope to see everybody there. And next week, I think a lot of us are going to be attending the Arizona League of Cities and Towns annual conference, which we're really looking forward to, and any updates that are important to bring before you, we will. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to see everybody again after the 6-week break that we had this summer. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I thank everybody that's watching live streaming and on Cox Channel 11. As I always say, an informed public is a good public to keep an eye on their public officials and what's going on in our town. I hope you all had a great summer. Like you've heard many people speak here tonight, I'll keep it somewhat brief because we've done so much and I don't want to bore everybody. But there were a number of ribbon cuttings, many constituent meetings, and many things we did over the summer. I didn't take a break. I worked every single day. A meeting that we did recently was Fountain Hills Cares. As you guys probably are aware, in the past we've done alcoholism and drug addiction for teenagers, bullying, cyberbullying, depression. This next one is going to be a little bit towards an older audience, even though everybody is welcome to come. It's going to be more towards seniors, and that's going to be addressing frauds, scams, and phishing. And I'm not talking about phishing with a pole. I'm talking about the phishing that we actually get here all the time in our emails. A lot of the elderly people are a little more vulnerable to these kind of attacks. They get something from their bank that says we're going to close your account unless you hit this hyperlink. It's terrible. Some people lose their life savings over it. So most people consider their town government or just government in general that's who regulates us and that's who taxes us. And I think the Fountain Hills Cares is wonderful because the mayor and Peggy and myself, Bo Larson, Captain Crancer, we get together. We talk about this and we try to educate the people on how to protect themselves. And so it's government plus, it's very interactive with the people, and I'm proud to be on that. I did go to the Maricopa County Sheriff's meeting with the mayor and with Blue and Rachel, and I was honored to go. I don't view that as a partisan thing. I think it was a pretty fair representation of the council. And also, I'm not sure about the reference to 7 months. When a doctor gets a job at a hospital, you don't wait for 7 months to do your first operation. When I was in the state's attorney's office, I was having jury trials and bench trials in my second week. And so I think I was prepared for that meeting. And I think I represented the town of Fountain Hills very well at that meeting, particularly with my educational and background. We did meet with the Sheriff Penzone. We met with the chief, CFO, and other high-ranking officials. Many of the things that Jerry discussed, we discussed. Overbilling, understaffing, the contract, proactive versus reactive law enforcement, Rio Verde, Tonto Verde, the Matrix contract, the Matrix report, which I had in my hand and I read off of. And so I do think I've represented the town fair. Having a face-to-face meeting with the sheriff allowed us to get a lot more done than you can on emails and on the phone. It was a very frank meeting. It was a tough meeting. It was terse at many times. It was scheduled for 1 hour. It went for 90 minutes. And we covered a lot of material. And I think a lot of good is going to come out of that. And so I'm glad I was there for that. And I'm proud to have been there. Lastly, this Saturday at the community center, there's going to be a band called the Desert Valley Winds, and I play the saxophone for that band, and I would invite all the council, the mayor, vice mayor, and the population and the town staff to join me to play a little music and have a little fun, okay? It'll be just 1 hour, like I said, it's at the community center, and I would appreciate it if everyone can come out and say hi. So thank you very much. That's
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And as someone who loves brevity, I will be pretty brief. So did take some time off, did some traveling. Literally the day I came back, had an opportunity to attend the Maricopa Association of Governments Regional Council. It was eye-opening to see what a bigger world and universe that we have in Maricopa County, and some of the things that we should really be refocusing and kind of centering on that agenda there. So we did that. We had a bunch of the Chamber of Commerce had a few ribbon cuttings and such, which was very productive. And we are right in the back of the, right back into business here. The congratulations to the Falcons football team winning their first game on Friday. That was an away game, and coming back home this Friday. So we're looking forward to getting a lot done. Also looking forward to the conference coming next week also. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all going this time. So it's National Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day. It's established in remembrance of those lost to fentanyl poisoning and to acknowledge the devastation this drug has brought to hundreds of thousands of affected family members. The National Day was actually observed yesterday, August 21st, and I want to thank Councilwoman Kalvianakis for requesting that I mention this important issue. As part of the regional display of unity, the fountain will be lit in blue and yellow, Ukraine's national colors, on Thursday, the 24th, in honor of Ukraine Independence Day, 2023. The town is honored to be able to lend a hand with the community center for the fundraiser for the Maui Lahaina from Four Peaks Rotary. All that information is on their website. That will be Saturday, the 9th of September. The 9th of September at the community center at 5 o'clock. We've obviously had a lot of things going on over the summer. One of the things I was able to do is go to the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors. They had a forum, mayor legislative forum. They pointed out that they, as a group, are in favor, even though it's Scottsdale, Fountain Hills Unified School District bond. And there were a lot of mayors there, a lot of realtors there. Some of our local people were there, and it was very nice to be able to speak to them about our futures. We had a lighthearted exchange for a couple of days last weekend with Channel 3, Channel 5, Good Morning Arizona. For some reason, the fountain wasn't on when they first started, so they started emailing us, Paul Horton, and Bo was such a great help, and Kevin went out there and made sure so that the next they turned the TV on, they put it on. David Caltabiano, who their family played basketball with my kids, he's their anchor. And while he was up there, he gave a shout out to a couple of restaurants here in town, and so there's a lot of buzz. And then they did it again the next day, so it was really cool. Again, I think Amanda knew about that, so this is the ways that we keep ourselves out there. I was able to do that Smithsonian thing for the dark skies, and had the International Dark Sky Discovery Center information there, so a lot of people took it. So again, Fountain Hill's on the map. Last, I want to thank Councilwoman now, Peggy McMahon, for serving as vice mayor since December and taking on projects, attending a lot of things with me and for me. And the transition actually took place last month, and so I look forward to continuing our work with Vice Mayor Sharon Grzybowski for the good of our entire community. So thank you all. Next, we're going to move to presentations, and we're starting, I believe, with our Director of Economic Development, Amanda Jacobson, is going to give us an update fourth quarter update. Hi.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the audience. Welcome back. Our residents sometimes often ask, doesn't it slow down in the summer? I'll tell you, no, it never slows down. It's been busy. As the mayor mentioned, I'll be providing my fourth quarter update. So that was from April to June. But as always, if something recent came about, I will let you guys know. We will start with what we always get questions about, business attraction. So happy to report we had some new storefront openings, so filling up some of those vacancies. Arizona Stone and Crystal Company has opened. They're off of Parkview. And so as it says, stone and crystal, so think of two like natural healing, that is located off of Parkview. Alpha Financial Nordic, again, it's in its name, so financial services off of northeast corner of Verde River and the Avenue of the Fountains. Motorvolt, we've been hearing about, is opened, and their website says they are completely sold out, so of their vehicle storage. And then Snowy Ice Cream just recently opened on the Avenue. So this is really under business attraction and retention and expansion. So the same owners of Oka Sushi have invested into another building along the Avenue. So excited to see that. Coming soon, we of course have the coffee roasters, Dutch Bros that we've talked about, but something new is Above Board Charcuterie will also be under a franchise name of Gray's Craze. That will be opening up to on Park Place on the Avenue. And we've, over the last couple of months and really the last couple of weeks, Mr. Wesley and I have been meeting with their broker, and so people are very excited. So hopefully we'll be able to report something real exciting and interesting the next quarter. And then, of course, Phoenix Cannabis. So while not a new building, it is a new owner and also some retention expansion there. So they will be adding recreational marijuana and they're expanding their dispensary. And so that is off of Enterprise. Our business retention and expansion, so Councilwoman Toth mentioned this, and then we also did some site visits with the Councilmember Calavianakis. So we're able to continue our partnership with the Chamber in trying to visit our businesses. And so what has been a common theme in every site visit is workforce and lack thereof, specifically local to Fountain Hills. And so the challenge to retain employees when they're having to travel from Phoenix, Mesa, Tempe, Scottsdale, Chandler, those are the cities that we're hearing from our businesses. And so it ties into, I'll talk about it briefly, but we'll talk more in September with the proposed economic development strategy. But if you look at all of our major employers, they're service-based. If you think of the school, if you think of the town, if you think of our grocery stores, and the annual salary of a service-based worker is less than $40K. So there's some issues and imbalance, and so hopefully we'll be working on that over the next year, a couple of years, to modify that. And then we were able to partner again with the Chamber on our 8-week Shop Local ad campaign. So some of our businesses last year, when I met with them, they're like, we need the town support. And so I start to ask, what does support look like? And so they're like, help us in the summer and really push the message of shopping local. And so reminding our residents, we do not have a local primary property tax. And so we rely heavily on sales tax. So we hope you are doing us proud, seeing that sales tax, but again, also retaining our businesses who, again, they have opportunities to choose anywhere, but they decided to choose Fountain Hills. Our apartment occupancy rate remains the same, so really in the high 90 percentile. Again, I always point out Four Peaks Vista condos, so that's not 100% rentable. Some of those condos are for sale, so that number will always be a bit lower. But again, really what this graph illustrates is a supply-demand issue. So if someone was looking for multifamily, you just can't find it. It's hard to come by. Next, our vacancy rates, looking at office, industrial, and retail. And so just a reminder, or if we have a new resident or someone new wanting to participate in our council meetings, that first vacancy rate column comes from CoStar, which is a commercial software company that, through our partnership with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, they cover that expense for us. So you'll see that rate. The one next to it, as I have shared with you, but again, if you're new, we have some brokers and property owners who are not actively listing their property. So it's passive. And so that requires your staff to go out and drive around and try to figure things out. The good news I will share with you, and beginning next quarter, we're going to add another column to sort of show the difference, if we're seeing an increase or a decrease. But you may recall sort of the almost alarming number under office the last quarter. It was 49.5%, so nearly 50%. So that has gone down to 37.9, which is exciting. Again, that high rate is not a Fountain Hills issue. This is something, again, we're seeing nationally. Thank you, COVID, again, pushing people home. Those are some of those ramifications. And then to just remind to our residents that sometimes you may see a vacant building and you're not seeing a lot of activity, but we're knowing there's some movement. People are buying, people are contemplating what to do. So sometimes things may remain a little bit vacant until businesses decide what they're going to do, get the appropriate financing, et cetera. Our economic development strategy, just to give an update. So again, we had a community leaders workshop back January 12th. We had a workshop open to the public on April 12th. And then I want to thank the council members. So you guys were busy with me over the summer doing some one-on-one meetings. Again, I felt the importance of that was to be really, really, really high level, just to make sure you guys were comfortable and I did not shock you once the draft was finalized. So that will go before SPAC, our Strategic Planning Advisory Commission, tomorrow to get feedback, and we're tentatively scheduled to come and bring that back to council on September 6th, hopefully for some action and positive action, putting positive vibes out there. And so our Arizona Office of Tourism Prop 302 grant, just wanted to let you guys know we were able to close out the fiscal year with over $85,000. And again, as a reminder, the previous years, AOT was estimating very, very, very conservatively because of COVID. And so they allowed us the last year to have rollover funds. And so this year we needed to commit all of that. And so that $85,000 grant money, there's no match to it. And so again, was able to assist us with our newly branded Experience website. We've been able to get new photography. We've been able to work with vendors to help with our SEO and some of the things we needed to kind of fix behind the scenes. We were able to do a tourism video with local business owner Andrew Day with Daylight Films. And then we started a blog feature under the website that Clayson Communications, so Debbie Clayson, again, a local business owner, is assisting. And so our estimates this year, so again, can fluctuate month by month, is over $69,000. Our partnerships, I will not get into all of them. I've mentioned a few, but do want to give a shout out to the Fountain Hills Dark Sky Association. So Vicki Dirksen and John Kraft have spent a little bit of time with me. We almost saw each other weekly, I think, in the month of May or June. But as we're starting to plan, we are the destination marketing organization. So we want to look at all of our community and members of how we can move the needle. And then also I was able to call upon Vicki Dirksen. So the Arizona Office of Tourism was in a partnership with ASU and the Young Leaders of Americas. And so they had a student from, formerly from Haiti, and is now studying in Toronto. And so if you think of Haiti, they don't have electricity. And so there's a lot of things that evokes, that darkness. And so Vicki was able to bring into light the positive with the dark skies and stargazing. So a big thank you to Vicki and AOT and ASU for thinking of Fountain Hills. I think we have 2 more slides. So tourism, again, the hotel occupancy remains below 70%. Our social media, specifically to our Instagram, increased by 44%. So again, economic development and community relations are putting together plans and looking forward, thinking of trying to get exposure for Fountain Hills. We have not brought this up, but I thought this was exciting. So we have, of course, our Earth Cam that's located on the Experience Fountain Hills website. And so just for the fiscal year, there are 1.3 million views. So people are looking at us. And then our website too, again, just want to thank Economic Development Specialist / Management Analyst John Perez for all of his work, as well as Bo Larson. And really updating the website, you can see a drastic change. There was a 35% increase. Our top 5 cities sort of remain the same with Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, LA, Chandler. And then you'll remember last quarter, we were able to invest, again, through the AOT Visit Arizona Initiative Marketing Grant, say that 3 times, into a tourism and event impact study. So of course, coming in as the new gal, I had my thoughts on what tourism was for Fountain Hills, but sometimes it's good to get an outside expert. And so one thing we had them look at too is there's lots of messaging around half the population leaves. And I was able to share some stories with those that met one-on-one that when some people just hear that, they may not do the research, it's believable. And so we had a few businesses say, hey, I can't survive in Fountain Hills because I heard half your population's leaving. So looking at our census, looking at the number of households that could be seasonal, somewhat occupied. The estimated winter visitors that are leaving is 11.8%. And so again, as we start to look at our strategy, we'll ask everyone to help with our messaging, because again, we want positive messaging. We want people to know that they can survive here. As far as our events, there was 32.7% that are local coming to our events. 43.8% is regional. So think again, locals, Fountain Hills, regional is somewhat outside. This was specific to Maricopa, and our out-of-state is 23.5. And so some opportunities here is looking at our hotels. Yes, we have 4 hotels, but there's only over 300 rooms that are available. So there are opportunities to attract new resorts. There are opportunities to get conventions. Again, some of our local hotels have decided to get rid of some of their meeting rooms, thinking again, just the aftermath of COVID, that people aren't gathering as much. There's the Zoom capabilities. I don't know about you, but I like to be in person. That's just me. And then there's opportunities of doing multi-day events. If we think about some of our local events, they're one day, it's 4 or 6 hours, and we're not giving them a reason to stay. And so I planted a seed with some of you that we may need to ask for some money to get a multi-day and hopefully have support for that. Maybe we get some third-party promoters coming in, and we have seen some interest on that end. And again, this year we'll be able to continue our work with our national PR company to look to beyond the region, but looking nationally to help just the extension of the multiple departments, get our name out there, look at pitches. And with that, any questions? You're welcome.
Questions or comments? Well, I do.
Hey, you're making it easy.
Well, sorry. No, I'm not going to say anything bad. But I know that 1.3 million views of the web, oh my gosh, of the Earth Cam. I was probably a few of those myself, but I also, we did talk about that at the Smithsonian, so there's a lot of people. I'm glad you brought Vicki up. There's people walking around with our pamphlets about our dark skies and about the Discovery Center, and with our fountain pens. So there's people in Chile and in Germany and all over who have fountain pens now. So that was a good way to talk about tourism, because these folks were tourists. Thank you for meeting with Rachel and I with Glenn Williamson and Holly Mencher from the Canadian Arizona Business Council and creating your report about that, because that really falls into what you were talking about with the winter visitors and such, and big-time tourism. And we talk about astrotourism with the dark skies, and we talk about medical tourism. So there's a lot of, there are a lot of possibilities and potential for us. And last, I know you're going to be bringing us the economic development plan next meeting, and you're going to be presenting it tomorrow. Were you able to get input from all the council members on that?
Madam Mayor, I was able to meet with 6 out of 7 of the council members. And
Okay,
so
thank you.
there's still that opportunity, but again, respected that you guys were traveling and taking downtime.
Yeah, well, you gave us the opportunity to meet with you, so we appreciate that very much. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work, and we look forward to the report next time.
All right, thank you.
Our next item is a presentation by our Public Works Director, Justin Weldy, about our construction storage site. Hi.
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, welcome back. Since just after incorporation, the newly formed town, its newly at that time appointed body and very limited staff began to look towards the future. There was an incredible amount of growth in this community's future, and at that time they were a little bit strapped for cash. The largest developer in this community at that time offered to work with the newly appointed body and the mayor and council, and the staff on some projects that they had going, and asked the town if they would be interested in any of the dirt and rocks, which are a very valuable commodity, not only in this town, but across this valley. After that time, the town staff began to look at the 5- and 10-year horizon coming forward, and especially when it comes to road building. From basically the beginning, the town staff has worked with developers and single home builders or single lots to receive and or accept their excessive material. There's a couple of benefits to this. One of them is it reduces the cost to either the developer and or the single home, and it also reduces the cost for the town for future projects, and it eliminates an incredible amount of truck traffic, not only through the town, but also down the SR 87 and back there. In case you're not aware, there's not a lot of places nearby. This is the first example of an area, and this is on Bainbridge and Golden Eagle Boulevard. This material was donated from a single lot in Eagle's Nest. The town's estimated cost for this material, which is currently being used and will be used on several projects, is approximately $480,000. We did not spend a dime to get it there. The custom home builder has indicated that it's considerably more than that in savings for their customer, and also, again, the reduction of all of the truck traffic. This material is not only used for temporary storage, which in this case, this material has been used for the Panorama project. It will also be used for the Golden Eagle project, but more often than not, this site right here is our staging area for pavement management in the northwest section and or the northern sections of town. This next one right here is a series of boulders, and the majority of this material came from the area of Palisades and Shea. There is approximately $700,000 worth of boulders here. This rock is currently being used on 3 of our projects and will be used primarily in the Golden Eagle area, but we always have kept material in this area as part of our preparedness plan for wash maintenance. After storm events, we have a considerable amount of erosion and or migration, materials moving. We need to shore that up, especially closer to homes and properties. So while this rock here is temporary in nature and will eventually be moved, there will be more material coming into this. And this slide right here is important for a couple of reasons. One, it shows the valuable asset that was donated to the town. Two, it shows one of our access roads to one of our dams. And that access road is plated with our old asphalt, which is an allowable use for that under ADEQ. So there's a couple of items we address here. One, we were able to utilize some of our milled up asphalt. And two, we were able to meet the PM10 demands for keeping the dust and particulate matter down for the maintenance road to the wash in Sycamore, or the dam in Sycamore. This location right here is on the eastern boundary of town near Desert Vista Park. This area here is actually fenced off. What we have here is very expensive dirt and granite that was donated by local contractors. It was excess. Some of this stuff right here is literally a few $100s a ton. For obvious reasons, we keep it back here and we utilize it for our town projects. And again, relatively expensive material is what we keep back here. We're going to start talking about some relatively long-range programs and some really big numbers here. For each of our fill sites that we're going to discuss, this is a typical site plan that is prepared and sealed by an engineer. This shows the location of the work, the size and depth, and other important aspects, including but not limited to any drainage that is necessary for it. This is what it looks like during the planning process. This is what it looks like when it's finished. This area here, from right here at the entry, all the way back to here is a little bit more than 1,000 feet. At its widest point right here, it's about 100 feet. At the deepest location, it's about 65 feet. This entire fill right here was built from construction and fire rock. It's important to note that right here, just out of sight, and you can't see it very well, there is a 96-inch pipe that crosses Shea. When the casitas at Fire Rock were built, the water came through that pipe and began to erode and scour the area near these retaining walls, and there's 3 retaining walls in this area. We worked on that one relatively quickly, and the town staff actually purchased that 96-inch pipe, and a local contractor and his son installed it at no cost in exchange for being allowed to place the material there. Let's discuss that just briefly. For each of the locations, each of these contractors are required to secure a permit from the town. There are conditions attached to that permit. For this particular one right here on Shea, where it requires traffic control, they are required to comply with any temporary traffic control regulations that we have, and they are required to pay a permit fee for that and also the cost for that. This one right here is about $3.5 million. This is in the next phase of eastbound widening for Shea, not the one that we're currently working on, but the next one. You might recognize this young man here. This is the town engineer, Mr. Janover. We appreciate Bo taking this photo and saving it for us. This material right here was donated from a project that was just this afternoon or evening discussed by the Economic Development Director, the Motor Vault. They donated this material. Our low-end cost, and all of our numbers are very, very conservative. This is about $160,000 worth of soil, and it reduced their costs substantially because it was right down the road and it's clean material. This is what it looked like when there were questions, and understandably so. People driving by seeing this pile of dirt in this area have questions, and we did our best to answer them. This photo right here, there are actually 3 of them here. The one on the top right is what this area of Panorama looked like prior to phase 2 of the Panorama Storm Drain Project. The one on the bottom right obviously is a high altitude aerial but most importantly, the one on the left not only demonstrates where all of that material went, but you'll see right up here, oh, let's push another button this time. This rock right here came from that storage out at Bainbridge and Golden Eagle Park. Should be noted that this material was placed by the contractor that was doing the panorama project at no additional cost. That project, in fact, came in under budget. I will say that we paid our local landscaper at Verde Valley Nursery to place the rock. This is another fill site. This fill site right here actually starts at this location and comes down to here. This one here is right around $1.5 million, and this one is actually included in the Shea widening now. This one right here is separate. This is a very long one, and it's just across from Palatial Estates. It starts here, runs down here, a little bit more than 1,000 feet long. All of that material was placed there by the Fountain Hills Sanitary District's contractor that was the low bidder for one of their force main jobs right here in town. All of that was placed out there at no cost to the town, and it also shored up some areas in there where we had bad erosion. That one right there, different estimates on that, but the closest one we have is about $2.5 to $3.1 million. For those of you that have been here for a while, you might recognize this location. This is on Shea, right near Bolera. This is the former affluent evaporation ponds prior to the sanitary district putting in their advanced water treatment plants and their advanced treatment systems that allow this water to be pushed to their customers. This is what it looks like after it was filled with donated material from a nearby development. Again, not only the town, but the sanitary district benefits from some of these materials. This right here is an Ashbrook wash between Hampstead and Fountain Hills Boulevard. There was an incredible storm just a couple of years ago that created what is referred to as a lateral migration. That lateral migration created this, whoa, I'm gonna learn how to use these buttons. There it is. It's about a 6-foot cut, and it is approximately 1 foot from that home, and the water was running at this level here, so about 5 feet high. From several of the areas that you saw here tonight and others that have not been disclosed, the town staff worked with their on-call contractors, brought in 2, 3, and 4 foot in diameter boulders and dirt, and were able to create the fill to shore up this private property and create this gentle 1.5 to 1 slope, 2 to 1 slope out to the original flow line. This material here was stockpiled in 3 different places. One of the places that we retrieved those large boulders was from the area of Sycamore Wash, and then we have another area in Ashbrook Wash upstream where we also have large boulders stored. This is an Ashbrook Wash. In the background is Hampstead. This is material donated recently from a project south of Shea on Saguaro for a storage unit. I had asked this local contractor for a rough estimate about this material, and he was working on that, but I will tell you it's a large sum of money. I didn't want to put a guess on it, but I will tell you that the cost savings was shared with the developer. It's a local builder. The benefit of this is phase 1 of the Ashbrook Wash slope stabilization. This is what we intend to show the Maricopa County Flood Control District when we apply for grants for this area. Oh, wrong button. The lateral migration that I showed you earlier is just downstream from where this material is at. So what we're doing is we're working on shoring up the north side of Ashbrook Watch, which is where we're facing some challenges, but we also have some on the south side. This, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, will prove as an excellent example of how the town utilizes donated materials to offset costs for these projects and benefit the community, and also support and documentation for the flood control district for that grant. It's actually several grants. Getting close to the end here. This is Four Peak Park. This is the last portion of a multi-year renovation to that park. There are approximately 30 boulders, plus or minus, in view that were donated locally from a big development. They're roughly between $1,000 and $1,500 a piece. We have a total of about 48 at Four Peaks Park. Originally, they were placed at the direction of then Community Services Director as a physical barrier to stop some of the vandalism that was taking place at this park. As part of each of the phase, those boulders then became part of the fabric of that park and now blend in as they were intended to be there all along. Couple of quick ones here. This is on La Montana. This is south of Town Hall at Segundo. This project here allowed town to put in a right turn pocket and extend the sidewalk in this area so we can at least get people to Segundo. The material pipe was purchased by the town, installed by a local contractor at no cost by allowing them to install that pipe, and again, they paid the fees. It used to come out to about right here, and it was a pretty steep drop off in that area. This is another one of those locations on Fountain Hills Boulevard where we were able to utilize local fill, and again, the contractor that placed it installed this pipe at no cost to the town. This one here is actually pretty important. This entire area was filled by the same contractor that did the work across the street, and the pipes extended. What it allowed was for the town to utilize grant funding from the Safe Routes to School to install that sidewalk between Oxford and Glenbrook. At the time, this sidewalk led to the middle school, which is now McDowell Mountain Elementary. This is just another one down on Indian Wells where we were able to extend it and create a shoulder. Now we're to the end. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that the town staff, not just myself but others, works diligently to help offset and reduce the cost of future projects. It's no secret that for some of these capital projects, especially the ones on the 5, 10, 15, and 20-year range for widening shape Fountain Hills Boulevard, we are cash strapped to get some of that done. And these materials, which I've just showed you a fraction of what's been placed, are valuable for this community. Any questions? I'll certainly do my best to answer them.
Justin, how many piles of material would you say you have? How many storage areas in town? $12. And are we at capacity in most of those, or?
With one exception, the one on Bainbridge and Golden Eagle, we are currently moving that material, Councilmember, out to other projects because very shortly that will be used as a staging for our paving. But all of the other locations where they are stored, which is on town property, in washes, and I think this is important to point out, where this material is stored is in previously disturbed areas. We do not disturb or do any clearing to place this material. That is a violation of our own ordinance for the washes. So all the material is stored on previously disturbed property. We do not disturb any new property or create for storage.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Weldy, Just to do a thank you for the outside the box thinking and some of these solutions. It is appreciated. And I know that you drove me around a couple of these, and it was good seeing some of these and seeing some of those photos, firsthand. There have been a couple emails about the Sycamore Wash. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I think there's I can think of 3 locations which either are very close or adjacent to residential areas, and just. We want to obviously be concerned of how it looks, and then we also don't know how long it's being stored. I mean, if it's just a temporary thing, if it's going to be for 2 months and then it's going to be gone, I think people are reasonable, they can deal with that. But if it's going to be longer than that, give us an update on that, how we plan on that. And I don't know if you've seen a couple of the emails that we received from the Sycamore Wash residents.
Madam Mayor, council member, we are certainly aware of the concerns, and we understand that. I think it's important to note that this area has been used for storage since 1990. The material changes colors. This just happens to be a little bit brighter color. I would certainly work with you and the town manager and these other proposed locations, and we will take a look at them and see if they are actually available on town property and if we could access them without any additional disturbance.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Thank you very much. This is one of the reasons I always tell people to make sure they come to town council meetings, to watch it on TV, watch it live streaming, come to the meetings, because this doesn't seem like it's a very sexy or a big deal, but it is. What you and the town staff have done since 1990 has literally saved this town millions of dollars. And how do you replace that? How do you do it? Do you take these materials and just tell the developers to just, you take them out of Fountain Hills and then we pay a company to bring these infill materials back in? If the decision was, well, we're gonna have 12 spots that we put this infill material, or we won't, and then we're gonna have to pass a primary property tax to repay the millions of dollars that would cost to do these improvements, I think it'd be almost universal that people would say, well, we don't want to have a huge tax, but this is the nitty-gritty work of the town, and what you guys are doing is stellar work. And the Sycamore Wash, Councilmember Friedel and I, we did go to speak with some of the residents that had concerns, and we listened carefully. We listened to their concerns. We came to the town, we talked to Rachel, and we set up a meeting with you. We worked on a mitigation plan to maybe knock down the height to remove some of the debris, which we have done since then. And then we had a plan to do like camouflage nets to mitigate the damage. Not damage, to mitigate just what they call an eyesore. And so that's proactive. It's a great thing that we're doing. And if people understood the consequences of not doing what you're doing, it speaks for itself. So all I can say is thank you, great work, and keep it up.
Any other? No applause, please. Any other comments or questions? I know we had some written comments, correct? Thanks.
Yes, Mayor, we do. We have several written comments. Your first one is from Jill Hill. She has her written comment. She's against the storing. Well, at least we'll see. They still are. And then Steve Hill, he's against the storing. And then we had one. Jennifer actually has 2 papers because she's needed more room. So Jennifer Brown is against it. And then we have Dr. Andrew Holycross. These are all in your packet. He's against it as well. And that's it for the written comments.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Justin. And again, since 1990, that's what the town's been doing, and that's 1 year out of incorporation. So I think they were thinking way back then and continuing to do that now. And we appreciate you working with the neighbors who are concerned about the views and doing what we can do, but this is obviously a good practice for our town. Thank you. Our next item is our call to the public, and do we have speaker cards, Linda?
Yes, Mayor, we do. You have one in your packet because they submitted theirs online, so we'll start out with Pam Cap, and on deck is Larry Myers.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, my fellow neighbors from Fountain Hills. My name is Pam Cap. My family and I have lived here for 7 years now. Road conditions have been a problem in Fountain Hills for a very long time now. Recently, Councilmember Skillicorn posted 2 videos on his Alan Skillicorn for Fountain Hills social media page. One was on Golden Eagle. He went into detail about why the street deteriorates and what is used to patch them. Unfortunately, Councilmember Skillicorn doesn't seem to understand how our streets are actually chosen to be fixed. We have a citizen street committee that works directly with a firm that assesses which streets go first, like Glenbrook. That was just done and it looks great. The second video is Councilmember Skillicorn complaining about the Park's 3 parking lots being repaved instead of Golden Eagle. Since he didn't bother to do his job and ask the park, I did. The parking lot repavement program was planned and approved in 2016. As this video points out, it's in need of repair. That's called planning ahead, being proactive. The Sillicorn Roads First program failed horrifically, not even a second. So his response was to attack staff. As a council member, working with staff is imperative. So implying wrongdoing or failure to complete a required task because of political allegiance is just another way of saying he didn't get his way. Councilmember Skillicorn accused staff of delaying copies of town check registers when he could have requested the same information from the Department of Revenue on his own. Considering the reduced work week, he could have eliminated some of the work by doing it himself instead of putting more work on the staff. Councilmember Skillicorn needs to understand that this isn't Illinois anymore. This isn't Washington, D.C., and we are not at the border. This is the town of Fountain Hills, and we need council members that focus on making the town of Fountain Hills better for every resident and every business owner of Fountain Hills. Finally, this fixation with the trans and LGBTQ community is getting old. Some council members don't seem to realize Fountain Hills includes many members, business owners of the LGBT community. Every time Councilmember Skillicorn, Toth, and Friedel post anti-trans and LGBT rhetoric, they're saying they don't represent us. Or at the very least, you were saying we don't deserve to be represented. It's very obvious they only wish to represent a select group of residents. That's why they censor their council member social media sites by blocking people and turning off comments. They reject others' opinions, knowledge, by shutting the door and blocking out their constituents. Thank you.
Mayor, council, staff, Larry Myers, now 42 contiguous years in Fountain Hills. Did you miss me? I missed you. And what would a council meeting be without one of its frequent flyers getting up and speaking? So I have something that's been bothering me since 2018, and no, I didn't coordinate this with Councilman Friedel. David Spellich, Jerry Friedel, and Marcus Bondenowitz ran on and visited my house in a meet and greet, and David particularly ran on fixing the MCSO contracts and overcharging. Even back then, the figure mentioned was $1 million. 2018, $1 million. I don't know what it is now. Marcus didn't win. Councilman Friedel sits here today. David Spellich is gone. So my question, after 5 years of knowing this overcharging has been going on, under Penn Zone. Why hadn't the previous council collected or tried to collect? And we're just now getting around to this. And so my next question is, since the town could certainly use the money, we're down $500,000 or better from the long-term rental tax that we're not going to get anymore. When does this council actually intend to collect the money that's been known about since 2018? That's it on that. I want to shift gears a little. Out at the McDowell Middle School, which is now the elementary school, there was an incident where a little person charged out of the school and needed to be tackled in the middle of the street, and it was in the 35-mile-an-hour zone, not the 15 in the crosswalk. So I would like to ask, and I did talk to Justin about this, there's no sidewalk on either side of the frontage of that school, and now there's little people out there. So if we put sidewalks in, maybe not, we transfer the sidewalks that we're going to put in somewhere else from our sidewalk projects, and put them on both sides. We could move the crosswalk, thus the 15-mile-an-hour zone, and the little people will be crossing the street closer to the school because they're crossing further down. I forget the road that runs there to the left as you're heading out towards Rio Verde. Anyway, that would be my request, and Justin's reply was the school pays for that. Can we just shift some of our sidewalk money and put the sidewalks in all the way along the frontage? Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Brown, and then on deck is Barry Wolborski.
Madam Mayor, councilors, thank you for hearing me tonight. What was presented to you by Director Weldy was a false choice. We don't have to destroy neighborhoods just so we can store materials. And I'm about to tell you the things that are wrong with the way the storage is going. No one is against saving the town money. Everyone wants to do that. But that doesn't mean that our neighborhoods have to be destroyed. I live adjacent to the Sycamore Wash. I have an acre there that goes down to the wash. I've lived there, I've owned that property since 2009, invested into this town when there was a recession going on and lots of people didn't invest in it. Spent thousands of dollars renovating the home to live there and have been a full-time resident since 2015. The problem is that these are piles of asphalt that have dust on them that blows through that wash when it's dry and blows up onto my patio and other people's patios, piles of dirt where it blows up there all the time when there's a storm. The wash is wide, and so the wind doesn't blow over the top of it, it blows through it and it lifts it up. There's no coverage of that storage. Your own town ordinance says if you have outside storage, you ought to have it covered. So there's piles of that, and it's surrounding saguaros, beautiful saguaros. It's a beautiful saguaro wash. Now, you have an ordinance, a town zoning ordinance. It says our neighborhood is R1, single family only, not storage facility. You can get a special permit if you want to do something different by the zoning department, but nobody's got a special permit, and probably because it would be too awkward, because then that would require some kind of environmental study or notice to the residents before you dump this into the wash. The town land use map describes that area as a park. A park. That's what it is on a color-coded town use map. It's a park, just like Fountain Park. Now, you're not going to dump anything in Fountain Park, are you? Nobody would suggest that that's worth doing, yet you can dump it in the park in the middle of a residential neighborhood. There's a sign posted there that says no dumping. Isn't that odd? a sign that says no dumping. And who's dumping? The town's dumping. And that no dumping sign says it's illegal to do that, that's illegal. But it's being done anyway. Now, what's the purpose of that sign, and what kind of message is that to the community that we'll put up a no dumping sign there, and then we'll dump there? Isn't that a great idea? No, it's not. So then there was...
Sir, your time's up. Your 3 minutes says, the buzzer just went off.
Okay,
Thanks.
well, I'm almost done. I want to talk about the town environmental plan, which was passed by the voters.
Your time's up, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time.
I am Barry Wilborski still. I haven't changed. I still live here. I'm going to talk about a couple different things today. And first, I'd like to say that I think Justin Welby deserves a raise. Okay, he's great. Now I'm going to attack him. In terms of the presentation, I want to talk about the area on Bainbridge and Golden Eagle. I disagree that it wasn't. It was natural 3 years ago. It's certainly not natural anymore today. Oh, I'm sorry. And it's a terrible eyesore. It's right at the northeast corner there, and worse than storing the materials there, they're now staging heavy, dirty, big, ugly, heavy equipment there. That area gets a lot of traffic up Golden Eagle. It's a terrible eyesore. It's right across the street from 2 churches and a preschool. There's a lot of traffic on the sidewalk across the street from it. I understand that you know, there's limited place to store things and equipment. That's fine. I think the town is saving so much money on all of this fill. Why not spend a little to put a fence up there, to put some landscaping in, and make it not an eyesore anymore? You can still use it for whatever you want to use it for, but let's make it not awful. And if you've never been up there, take a drive up just past Golden Eagle Park and take a look at it. It's pretty awful. The other item I wanted to talk to is about the flagpole at Golden Eagle Park. This is our award-winning park. This is our premier park in the area. We just spent $300,000 putting in brand new parking lots that are, I mean, we're just out there today. The one that's done is beautiful. My wife and I frequently walk in that park, and last February, the flagpole came down in the storm. We used to enjoy seeing the flag flying there. It reminded us of what this community is. You know, it was nice. And it's right out past Field 3, and so when all the baseball events come, they can look up and see the flag flying on top of the flagpole. That flagpole's been down for 6 months. I want to ask this council, and I want to ask the staff, why? What's it take to put a flagpole back up so the flag can fly again over our park? That's all I got.
Okay, next we have Glenn Wollenberg, and then on deck is Matthew Corrigan. Glenn also sent in a video that I emailed to each one of you. You may not have had an opportunity to look at it yet.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing us this opportunity to address the group. My wife and I moved here only 11 months ago, and both of our daughters live in Scottsdale area. That's why we moved here from a suburb of Chicago. We ended up moving in a beautiful home on Cholla. It was just gorgeous. And the views, we had 1.5 acres back in Illinois. We have 1.5 acres here in this community. We look out over these beautiful mountains, but when we go back to the end of our swimming pool, unfortunately, we look at a rock pile. And I hope you guys have viewed the video that I put out there. If you haven't, can you do it at some point tonight or tomorrow? Because I think it speaks volumes about what we're up against with the Saguaro rock pile. Back in Illinois, we don't call them rock piles, we call them dumps. And basically, that's what this thing is. I mean, it's got huge boulders, smaller boulders, but at the end of the day, It's got blacktop just sitting there, these millings that sit there. So when you look off our property, there is a section that must be 70 yards long of rock pile that is anywhere from 3 to 7 feet high. And I can tell you, we did not move into that area to look at those things. It's just, it doesn't seem right to me that they can take a residential area that was approved as a park and just dump materials there to save money for the village. There's got to be other opportunities, other places in industrial areas to put those rocks and that equipment. So thank you for hearing me out. I appreciate it. And I hope you'll review the video.
Madam Mayor, council members, I am Matthew Corrigan, homeowner and resident, Fountain Hills. Homelessness, that term homelessness, is best identified in an article from Epoch Times dated 6/21/23 by Wesley J. Smith, entitled, "What the Homeless Owe Us." I quote the following: "The homelessness crisis has many individual causes: untreated mental illness, drug addiction, domestic violence, hard economic times. But bad public policies, particularly a misguided approach to helping the homeless, known as Housing First, must take a large share of the blame. Housing First has a nice-sounding name. After all, who and what do people need most? A roof over their heads. That's a foremost thing. Alas, Housing First should be renamed Housing Only, as it was designed in a way that almost guarantees to make the crisis worse instead of better. Housing First requires nothing in return from the people who are being helped. Worse, thanks to a federal rule changes by President Barack Obama in 2013, any homelessness assistance program that receives federal money can only apply the Housing First formula that forbids requiring any conditions in return for housing assistance. Recipients of such aid, for example, cannot be required to attend drug counseling and rehabilitation programs, look for work, or even take mental health medicines as directed by a doctor. Supporters of Housing First promised the program would solve homelessness by 2023. In other words, right now. But obviously it failed. Supporters of Housing First promised this, and then, according to a story in the Los Angeles Times last year, revealed that LA showed each housing unit, homeless housing units, to cost $870,000 apiece for a one-bedroom apartment. That's not a solution, end quote. In his Heritage Foundation report dated August 4th, 2020, Chris Rufo, who has studied homelessness for over 20 years of research, concludes his report with 3 major takeaways. Policymakers must rethink the federal government's housing policy first. Treatment First programs address the substance abuse and mental illness behind much of homelessness and provide the most effective pathway to self-sufficiency. 3, policymakers should redirect housing funds to programs with proven records helping the homeless to overcome addiction, finding employment, and achieve independence. In conclusion, I would say and urge you leaders of Fountain Hills to abandon the Housing First policy and go for the cure, help these people, and vote for 2313. Thank you.
And next we have Christopher Enos.
Hey folks, I'm Chris Enos, and thank you for coming close to the pronunciation. I, first of all, want to thank each and every council person up here. I did a similar job a long time ago. It's a thankless job. You try. You're not being paid big bucks, and I really appreciate everything you do up here. You are the policymakers for the town. And basically, what my ears perked up when I heard contract, because I'm a lawyer. And you got to know the lawyer over here. And contracts are very important. They require enforcement abilities, give and take. In this case, the town has a contract, apparently, that it didn't work out so well. And I respectfully submit, and I don't know how this is undertaken so far, but if it's been going on since January, it's been too long. The policymakers should not be the ones who are negotiating the contract, with all due respect. And I've done this before. And what you need are attorneys who are also negotiators. You also want some expertise in police work to determine whether or not calls for service are being adequately addressed, response time, and so forth. And you want, from a contract approach, rights of recourse in the event of non-performance. I'm unaware completely of how much of that's been done so far. I would hope, though, that you don't run, as it has been suggested, up until the 11th hour and then are presented a document and they say, well, you know, this is the best you could do. I would hope that your attorney, I'm sure you've been involved in this contract, correct? No. Okay, good. I would hope that you listen to him and that he incorporates these safeguards that will address the apparent deficiencies that occurred before, and that basically you can then, as policymakers, decide whether or not it's in the best interest of the town to approve or disapprove of this contract. If it's not there, if these safeguards aren't there, this is too much money involved, and you got to remember one thing. The first duty of any town, as any government, is to protect its citizens. If you have to start investigating other ways, if working with the sheriff is a one-way street that's not helping you, then you might investigate other and further means to further enforce your local ordinances, that some of which you're considering tonight. We had a noise ordinance a while back, and the sheriff just didn't want to enforce it. So those all should be on the table, and you should have the ability to interact in that contract that your very able town attorney is going to negotiate for you, so that you have that ability to retain a good amount of local control. Don't try to do the job yourself, just judge the contract.
That's it for public comment.
Thank you very much. Our next item is our consent agenda. Could I get a motion, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Roll call, please. Sorry.
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Councilmember Friedel.
Aye.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Grisbaski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thank you. Yes.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Just very quickly, because I was personally named in the call to the public, I have like a 20-second spiel. I am a fierce supporter of the Constitution. Every single American was granted those rights by God, not by the government, and I do not take my commitment to those ideals lightly. I will not ever again address or entertain accusations that imply I believe otherwise about any people group. However, whatever your interpretation of any of my statements on nuanced issues may be, I'm not personally aware of any time that Councilmember Friedel has commented on that issue whatsoever. So I'd like for it to be very clear that the inclusion of his name was very clearly politically motivated. I am disappointed by your comments. It is very clear whenever I speak on any issue what my nuanced opinion might be. I will not entertain accusations that there is hate in my heart toward anyone.
Thank you. When people when people address council, councils are allowed to respond. So that's why she did that. Thank you. Okay, we have our first regular agenda item, which is a possible consideration of pedestrian in roadway ordinance. And is that you, Aaron?
I'm guessing so.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, before you tonight are a series of ordinances, the first of which is Ordinance 2023-11. It's nicknamed Pedestrians and the Roadway. My summary is in the council report. We've discussed this in a privileged setting. The sum and substance of the ordinance is that it would amend the code to prohibit individuals from standing or stopping in the roadway, medians, or areas adjacent to roadways where the speed limit is 35 miles per hour or greater, subject to limited exceptions. Those are generally defined to be emergencies, road work, landscaping work that happens on the side of roads, et cetera. This type of an ordinance was requested at the council meetings, at the council's June 20th meeting, and so it's here for your consideration, discussion, and possible action this evening. I and staff are happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Ever since we redid our booklet, we take comments from the audience first.
In your packet, you have several written comments. The first one is from Jennifer Brown, and she is for this ordinance. Rory Wilson is against the ordinance. Liz Gildersleeve is for the ordinance. Patrick Green is against the ordinance, and some of them made their comments, so you'll want to read those. And then in person, we have two people who would like to speak. Matthew Corrigan, and on deck is Kim Woborski.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor and council members. Matthew Corrigan, Fountain Hills. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, by the way, I support 2311. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration reports that in 2021, 7,388 pedestrians were killed nationally, representing a 13% increase over 2020. Not only that, but there were a total of 60,000 injuries involving pedestrians nationally. I have observed jaywalking alone as an increase noticeably in the last few years, and this is now confirmed by these government agency statistics. Admit it, you probably have seen it too. Pedestrians cross against the traffic and pedestrian lights. It seems almost like a form of rebellion of some sort, or a contest. Rather than using the crosswalk, they jot randomly across heavily trafficked areas 5 or 10 feet from the crosswalk. I don't know if it's a new foolishly devised game where points go to the most extremely dangerous new maneuver in a street dance, or if drugs, alcohol, mental illness come into play, but the game is deadly serious, and I do mean deadly. Whatever the case, safety must be the concern for the city. Other cities and towns have already proactively responded, passing ordinances to keep pedestrians and drivers safe. Glendale in October of last year passed an ordinance. Tempe passed an ordinance, 02016.21, prohibiting standing, laying, sitting in walkways, sidewalks, crosswalks, etc. These are the norm for cities concerned about safety, and that's the issue, safety. So for those who are violating that norm, we need ordinances. It's plain and simple. We have a problem. It's a national problem. It's a local problem. So again, I support 2311. It's good law. It's a great ordinance, and please vote for it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor and our new Vice Mayor, congratulations, and the council. Thank you. I'd like to just start by coming up and saying thank you. I brought my Kleenex in case I start to cry again about this. Thank you. I want to thank the staff for getting these ordinances together, and I want to thank the council for putting this on the first meeting of the season. I really appreciate it because I think this is a big potential issue for our town. And as some of you know, my husband and I moved here from the Seattle area about almost 4 years ago, and thanks for having this beautiful town for us to come to. We love it. I lived in the suburbs, and I worked in downtown Seattle, and I took the bus part of the time, but I had to drive to work part of the time. And, you know, I'm sure you've seen videos of Seattle. There are people living on the sides of the roads pretty much everywhere. And when you stop your car, sometimes people come out and walk on the street. And it's very dangerous. And sometimes people are walking on the street and the entrances to the freeways and other places. And it's very scary because you don't know when someone is going to come. And there's just the concern, am I going to run over someone? You know, is this person on drugs? Is this person mentally unstable? Am I in danger? And but I think the biggest safety concern is, am I going to hurt someone? And no one wants that. No one. And I really didn't want it. So I'm very excited about this ordinance and the others. So thank you. Oh. And I am a resident of Fountain Hills.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that's it for the cards. So Councilman, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to very quickly thank staff for putting this together. I mean, you took the intent of this and literally put it on the paper. And I really thank, and I'm not sure who drafted or team, but it was great. And I also want to thank how prompt this was. I mean, the first meeting back from break, it was on the agenda. I really appreciate that. And that that really means something to me, that this was taken seriously because, we talked about this. I was in Alaska in Dead Horse, Alaska, and we talked about this on Zoom, and all of a sudden, next meeting, it's on our agenda. So I really much appreciate that. Say thank you very much. And really, the only point that I want to say is that there's a whole bunch of roads in this town that are 35 miles per hour, and they're marked safety zone. They have big signs, safety zone. It just seems common sense that people are not straying across the road there on the median in these safety zones and other 35 mile an hour and above roads. So thank you very much again, and I encourage everyone to be an eye on this.
Thank you, Mayor. As we know from our last meeting, which feels like a year ago, but it wasn't, I promise, this was an issue that is very forefront in my mind. It's something that I brought up the last time that we discussed a similar topic. Having people going into the roadway, it is a safety issue. It's a safety issue for the driver. We don't know if that person is at risk of hurting themselves or others. I just, again, would like to echo the comments of Councilman Skillicorn to thank staff for working on this very diligently, and I look forward to passing it, hopefully.
Do we have local accident and traffic data related to this particular issue?
Vice Mayor, we pulled a number of traffic data, a bit of traffic data. Obviously, we're a smaller town. It is not necessarily high volume, but we did identify, with Justin's help, we were able to look at that and identify that the two primary intersections in our town that see the highest, not surprisingly, both the highest volume of traffic as well as relationally the highest incident rate are Shea and Palisades and Shea and Saguaro. So those are our two highest intersections, our two highest incident intersections in town when you look at the data.
Are those, sorry, I was going to follow up with a question. Those are either 35 mile an hour or higher streets, right?
Correct.
Okay.
My follow-up concern is, I think I read it in the staff report, that the MCO hasn't received word from their legal counsel regarding the enforcement of the proposed ordinance. Have we heard from them to know how we're going to make this happen?
We have not. I don't know if Larry's heard anything otherwise. No update.
No update. I kind of have a problem putting something into place that we don't have a way to be able to enforce it. I also wanted to talk about, the traffic data that you mentioned was specifically Cheyenne Palisades and Cheyenne Saguaro. Mentioned was speed limits of 35 plus. We don't have enough crosswalks in town. So jaywalking happens way more often than not, and there have been 2 council people that I know of on the dais right now that have admitted that they have jaywalked, because we just don't have enough crosswalks. And to say that there's one 5 feet away in most areas of our town is inaccurate. That's why we put the new one in last year, or was it the year before, at
It's been
Colony Drive-ish, Tower Drive, somewhere over there.
right across from Desert Vista.
And that closest crosswalk was over a half a mile, if I remember correctly. So I'm kind of having a problem with that. And that's all I have to say right now. I've got notes for later if we go further.
Aaron, is this our ordinance or is it MCSO's ordinance? Why do we need to get their permission to have an ordinance in our town? If we have an ordinance, aren't they supposed to enforce it?
Mayor and council member, this is our ordinance. We're contracted with MCSO to enforce our ordinances, but this is the town's ordinance.
Thank you.
Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ordinance appears to say that this is regarding stopping or remaining in any portion of the roadway, not necessarily increasing enforcement on jaywalking.
Mayor and council member, the text of the proposed amendment says that it will be, if passed, it would be unlawful for any pedestrian to stop or remain in the portion of any roadway designed for vehicular use, et cetera, et cetera. Does that answer the question?
It does, thank you.
I have a couple issues, difficult time looking at this as basically content neutral and not having a consideration for panhandlers involved in this without actually saying so. Last June, when we sat here at council and talked about it, the conversations about the medians, panhandling, and homeless issue all came under the guise of a homeless. It didn't start with safety. So, and that's on public record. So I have a difficulty separating this out from not trying to stop panhandlers from being in medians as part of this versus wholly 100% for safety purposes. I also haven't seen any of the traffic studies from the town or from MSCO supporting something like this ordinance would be in order. And the particular proposed ordinance specifically states that the council has studied the issue, considered traffic and accident data, and determined that prohibiting, stopping, and remaining, et cetera. Well, we haven't done that. I think this is indirectly targeting panhandlers. I think we have to be very, very careful about that because because they are a vulnerable, protected class, and we have to make all of our ordinances that directly or indirectly affect them constitutional. And in addition, back on the last page, criminalization of somebody standing in the medium is, to me, you're criminalizing an act that really isn't criminal conduct. And I say that because it's saying that a misdemeanor in the first degree would be applicable to someone violating this particular ordinance. So a misdemeanor in the first degree is a pretty hefty misdemeanor, $2,500 fine, up to 6 months in jail, et cetera. So given the conduct in the act, I just have to ask, is this excessive fines or excessive in light of what conduct we're talking about? Because I think that under the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, this type of punishment for the act is cruel and unusual punishment and will not pass the muster of constitutionally. And in addition, prior council, it's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, we took a look at the statutes and the penalties for things like are civil in nature. They're not criminal in nature. And so therefore, this is already in violation of what we have already decided in our town for civil penalties versus criminal penalties. Did I misstate that, or I didn't say it correctly or whatever? So on its face, and along with what Sharon said, I would like to move that we discuss this further, that we take time to look and analyze the traffic data, not questioning what you're saying, but I would like to see it because I don't want to put anything that is questionable or perhaps might be unconstitutional in any way, especially about punishing people for a simple act of standing in the median.
So, Mayor and council member, with respect to the last point about penalties, I think it was about 1.5 years or 2 ago, the council took action to modify the penalty scheme in our code to have the default, unless otherwise stated, be civil penalties for violation instead of criminal penalties, for the simple reason that it's extremely difficult for staff to try to consistently enforce criminal laws, which involve a whole different set of due process standards, much easier to cite people civilly. So if there's a desire to look at that provision of it, I think staff would certainly be open to it. I have not looking at anyone in particular, but I haven't heard any objection one way or another to that. You can deviate from the civil scheme if you want to in a particular ordinance, but if we wanted to call this for a first offense as a civil penalty and follow our standard format, we can do that.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, when I saw these 3 items on the agenda tonight, I thought that this one might be fairly simple. It seems like we're just this should be called the Codifying Common Sense Ordinance, okay? This is a no-brainer. The U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, points out that pedestrian crashes account for 17% of all traffic fatalities, and 74% of these occur at non-intersection locations. It's important to note that our ordinance does not single out any group, but is for the general safety of all the Fountain Hills pedestrians. Our language that staff wrote says, and I quote, "Safety concerns inherent with the individual stopping," not the homeless people, not the panhandlers, individuals. That means everybody. There's no Eighth Amendment. There's no singling people out here. And there's certainly not cruel and unusual punishment. It's just we're looking out for people. That's what we should be doing, looking out for the folks, particularly in high traffic, high volume streets and thoroughfares. That's the language. It does not single out homeless. It does not single out panhandlers. This ordinance is akin to a warning label, okay? It is to protect by providing direction about potential risks associated with loitering or walking in non-designated walking paths. Also, this ordinance can make a significant difference in determining whether Fountain Hills can be held liable for injuries caused by foreseeable accidents that will undoubtedly occur by violators. You may ask at this point, aren't people smart enough to know where to walk safely? Well, yes, but maybe no. Because if you look at some of the warning labels that we put on our products, I note on the chainsaw label, do not hold the wrong end of the chainsaw. On the snowmobile label, it says never use a lit match or open flame to check fuel level. There was a label on an iron that says do not iron while wearing shirt. There's a warning label on cans of pepper spray. This item might irritate eyes. And so I think all we're doing here is codifying something that is common sense, and I would certainly be in favor of supporting this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm very enthusiastic about keeping people safe and protecting our town, so I'd like to make a motion to approve this as drafted.
Second.
I have some comments, please. The idea of this, I know we all had legal advice on the ups and downs of this. If we were to look at it as strictly for safety, I would rather see it narrowed a bit. First of all, the civil penalty part of it, that's not in it, right? Even though you said that's a default. The way it's written right now, it wouldn't be the default. So I don't know if people would be amenable to that part of it.
Could I clarify my statement on that, Mayor? So the reason that we have the reference to section 182, which is the criminal and civil traffic penalty provisions of our code, that's what we're referencing back to. If we wanted to switch that and reference to the civil penalty provision of the code, section 183, we could do that. So I need to clarify a little bit.
That's one of the things, obviously, that I think would be helpful. As far as the intersections and areas with crash data, Shea and Palisades, Shea and Saguaro, I think when we looked at the looking at the turning lane at Fountain Hills Boulevard and Palisades, we talked about that being particularly dangerous, but active intersection. So I don't like the whole 35-mile-an-hour general like that, because I think we should concentrate on where we've seen evidence of this being more of a problem, of people being in areas where it's more dangerous. Getting back to the common sense thing, and I know I've talked to Aaron about this, because I think that when we put the sign corridor, safety corridor up, we have done things in the past without warrants and such. So I think we make some decisions on safety based on common sense. And so when it comes to Shea and Saguaro, even a sign spinner in a median, I don't think that would. I think it's a distraction. A car wash, so there's a light. The light could be saying turn left, turn right, go straight. There's somebody standing there. There's a crosswalk. I think that is worth discussing. That is a distraction as well. I don't know if I would never want it to be a criminal distraction, but I think that it is logical that having somebody in a intersection like that is potentially something that creates a situation that indeed has to do with safety. And one other thing that I thought about a little bit was when you do cross an intersection that has a median and it has a crosswalk, a light, sorry, it'll tell you, it gives you enough time to get from one side to the other, not to stop in the middle at the median. So I think that's a little bit of a intuitive message that they think it's not safe to stop in the middle. So I've said this before, I do have a problem because the agenda item is on homelessness, and we are to make this about safety for everyone. I don't know how you make that leap, and I think it's probably risky, but some of these more narrow effects would be something I would ask you to discuss and look at, perhaps get brought back to us without the criminal, perhaps not every street that's 35 miles an hour, but where we know we've seen issues of safety, where there's a lot of activity. And again, I think on this level, there are legitimate safety concerns that we can talk about. But if you don't agree with anything except the criminal part of that, well, I won't be able to accept this as is. So if you're willing to change it at all for any of the things that I said, Councilwoman, you have something to say?
Yes, I don't know if I made a motion earlier to move that we move this off and for further discussion, but maybe I didn't. But again, I can't agree with this because it stipulates that we have studied and seen safety issues on this, and we haven't. So again, I think it's premature, given how this is written, and also for cruel and unusual punishment, we're criminalizing an act of standing in the median. And if you think about that, if it were you standing in the median for whatever reason, and you went beyond a certain time or whatever, and all of a sudden you're criminally charged with standing there, I mean, to me, that it's just, it doesn't match. It's not criminal conduct. And for those reasons stated by the mayor, I would really appreciate it if we would take some more time to have the sheriff's department, to have our staff study traffic issues, et cetera, and come back based on safety concerns versus, indirectly or, using this to eliminate panhandling or other excessive conduct. So I would appreciate more time on this before we created this particular ordinance. Thank you.
We do have a motion and a second on the table. Would anybody like to have any further discussion?
If
Yes.
I could just say that if we removed the criminal, I think, not remove a criminal, but the criminal section, I think that I could see standing behind it. Another part of my concern is this subject was brought up when we started discussion on homeless. Homeless was mentioned in one of, I believe, the written call to publics. And jaywalking was mentioned, which is why I brought it up and brought up the lack of crosswalks that we have in our town. So we do need to, in my layperson's eyes, make a distinction that this is not about homelessness, this is not about jaywalking, that this is 100% about safety. And again, if we could remove the criminal and go from the one town code to the other town code that our counselor mentioned over there, then I could see approving it.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the table. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember McMahon. Yay. Councilmember Friedel.
Aye.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
You're at the table?
Approve as written. Approve as written.
I thought this is a motion to table.
No. This is Alan's motion and seconded by.
I thought motion was to table.
No, there wasn't no motion.
No. And that's easy. Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Madam Mayor, permission to explain my vote? I just want to make a point that as the person that asked for this, as the person who initially made a motion for it, the record should reflect this is about public safety. This is about people safe, motorists safe, pedestrians safe. It has nothing to do with any class of people or any individuals. It's about keeping people safe. And my vote is aye.
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Nay.
Mayor Dickey.
No, thank you. Okay, we can move on to the next one, which is the prohibited solicitation. Aaron?
Round two. Mayor, members, and council, as the mayor stated, this is agenda item 9B, Ordinance 23-12, Prohibited Solicitation. At the June 20th council meeting, the town council discussed a variety of options to alleviate the negative effects of homelessness, both for unsheltered individuals living on the streets and for business owners and residents nearby. The council is well aware and can appreciate that this is an issue that faces jurisdictions not only countywide, but statewide, nationwide. We are not alone in the issues that we deal with respect to unsheltered persons living on the street. At that June 20th meeting, the council directed staff to bring for council consideration and adoption an ordinance that is identical to the ordinance recently approved by the city of Glendale in October 2022. The ordinance that we brought forward in connection with that council direction is identical, except that it replaces the word city with town and Glendale with Fountain Hills. It is here for the council's consideration, as with the last agenda item. We've discussed this in a privileged setting as to the possible benefits and concerns of the ordinance. It's when we're ready for the council's direction as to how to proceed.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. First, we have written comments that are in your packet. Jennifer Brown is for this ordinance. Rory Wilson is against the ordinance. Liz Gildersleeve is for the ordinance. And Patrick Green is against the ordinance. And Patrick wrote some notes on here, so read those. And then we have one person in person who would like to speak on this issue, and it's Matthew Corrigan.
Hello again, Madam Mayor, council members. I know you're tired of me, but here I am. I applaud the courage and direction the council majority has taken to protect the residents and visitors of Fountain Hills from aggressive panhandling and soliciting. Since October 12, 2022, the city of Glendale has shown the correct path to protect the community from aggressive panhandling by passing a similar ordinance. Thank you for taking action on this public nuisance. Until this year, the city has taken an apology position for eliciting and soliciting by defending the beggar aggressor as victims of homelessness and reminding the residents and visitors with signs asking the law-abiding citizens to be the enforcement arm against the aggressor by reminding them it's okay to say no to panhandlers. Give instead to organizations that help those in need. Great idea. That's not the way to take care of the problem. Panhandlers use the sign as shade in the afternoon sun. Thank goodness we have a new majority with the courage and to lead and create reasonable ordinances, protect residents and visitors, and allow law enforcement to enforce the law to protect the citizens instead of the aggressors. But let safety be the first concern, protecting all, both the law-abiding and the aggressor offender. Please do the right thing and vote yes on Ordinance 2312. Thank you.
Discussion, please. Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, thank you, staff, for drafting this and getting it out to us. And sometimes I like to go right to the ordinance and, read what's there. The details there really matter, and really to go to the intent about this. So even, the public commented a couple things, and maybe that isn't quite correct to what the intent really is. So let's go right to the ordinance here. And it talks about aggressive solicitation. It talks about the loss of access or enjoyment to our public places. It also talks about the sense of fear and intimidation. Those are all items that, as a council, we have to really protect the people of our town, and we have to protect the visitor of our town. And that's why we're really here. And I'm going to kind of go on, and so specifically, sometimes individuals will solicit money near banks, near automatic teller machines, near places where other people are going to be confined environments. That's where some of the solicitation takes place. And literally the ordinance says right that. And in the ordinance, it says it is our desire to protect the citizens from fear and intimidation. That's exactly what we're doing here. This has nothing to do with a protected class. It has nothing to do with homelessness. It has nothing to do with panhandling. It's about protecting our town, and we want to protect the people and the residents and the people visiting us from fear and intimidation from aggressive solicitations. So I'm going to urge an aye vote on this.
Aaron, in your memos to us, you strongly suggested this not be passed. It's because it's literally certain to fail. The Glendale statute is really still very broad and sweeping, and it's not narrowly tailored as required under the Constitution. And I understand that the ACLU has sent a letter to Glendale warning, suggesting that they change the statute, or actually eliminate the statute, because they are contemplating filing a lawsuit, not only against Glendale, but possibly other towns and cities that might enact such a broad and sweeping statute. And as for being aggressive, that's also pretty suggestive and a broad assumption of assumed conduct by somebody that's merely being in a particular place and time. And I think that could be challenged as well, because what the court does look at is they look at this as freedom of speech under the First Amendment being paramount, because oftentimes panhandlers either voice or have a sign. And therefore, in other cases that I've read and looked at, that the courts have weighed in favor of First Amendment rights versus banning, somebody standing or, banning something like this. And once again, and I know I'm not explaining this very well, and I'm sorry, but I think that I don't think this is going to stand up to the Constitution. I really think that the ACLU is really, really closely looking at cities and towns and what they're doing, and that they will probably file suit. And again, I'm going to look at the Eighth Amendment for cruel and unusual punishment. That it's a petty offense. It's not a misdemeanor in the first degree offense. And I think other statute, or the other statute I think we talked about, I wasn't sure if 13219 is enforced or not. Did you look at that?
It is.
And it's a violation of this section is a petty offense, and that has to do with aggressive. So I think, once again, here we are, we're criminalizing an act that, given the act, that the criminal penalty is excessive, and I think the fine is excessive. And I once again, we have civil penalty on our books, so I completely disagree with this. I think that it's too broad and unconstitutional, and therefore I am absolutely not for it.
Thank you. Councilwoman? Vice Mayor?
No? Okay. Just make sure that Aaron didn't want to speak. I don't see Director Wesley here. Oh, I'm sorry, you are back there. This is probably a question for you. When we have a peddler or a solicitor that comes to Town Hall to get a license, tell me about that. Do they have to fill it out and tell you what or this is a POC thing? I'm sorry. It was nice to see you, though. He was hiding in the back. How is the form filled out? Because panhandling, which is a form of soliciting. So how do we handle a peddler or solicitor that comes to us? Does the form ask what their intentions are, what blocks they'll be going on, that kind of thing?
I do not believe it makes them specify which blocks. It just means that they're going to be approaching houses in residential districts and that sort of thing. It is an application. We do require background checks for peddlers' licenses. There's a $250 application fee for that, so it's not something that just anybody would come in and retrieve.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with this conversation. If you look up the definition of panhandling, it tells you that it is a form of solicitation. So is there any way that we can treat it as solicitation? I realize that the intent is different, but if we treat it as solicitation, which runs a background check and charges a fee, automatically, if I'm aggressively approached by someone, I'm calling my friend Larry. I just kind of feel like with, what was it, Reed versus the town of Gilbert, and the issues that I've read there, yes, protect safety of people is important, but trying to protect the town from litigation is also kind of important here. So where do you think about requesting a solicitation license or whatever it's called?
A couple of thoughts on that come to mind. And again, not having had but today to think, just now to think about it, and the conversations that I previously had with at least one other council member today. I think that the way that we could, so first of all, if that's the direction of council for us to evaluate, can we require of all solicitors, right, solicitations for donations or charitable donations to obtain, what did you say, permit or a license or something like that? Certainly that's something we would explore. I think there are probably a couple, there's at least one potential legal issue is, are we still carving out a certain category of speech, right? Solicitation on the whole from the rest of speech. But then practically, even if we're not running into that legal issue, Rachel and I were talking about something earlier today, that you then start to get into the issue of, if we really want to regulate all solicitation in town, that means we really are going to regulate all solicitation in town. I mean, if the panhandling has to fall under solicitation, then the bell ringing at Christmas time has to fall under solicitation. And I don't know if the Girl Scouts have to fall under solicitation, or I don't know. So I'm worried about how far that expands if we get into that category where we make it all inclusive. Those are my initial impressions. And I would certainly want to look at it further if that's the direction that council wants us to go. Okay. Sorry, was that more than?
Such a lawyer answer. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is one point that I did want to follow up on that was brought up about the First Amendment. And again, let's go right back to the text of the ordinance. Town council does not intend to limit a person from exercising a constitutional right on here. It's right in the text. That's covered, and our intent is not to take away First Amendment rights. We want to protect them. Again, we're just trying to protect people from fear and intimidation. And on that note, I would like to make a motion to approve it as drafted.
Second.
Yeah.
You can't put, it's not going to work. People have fundamental rights to the First Amendment, to free speech. And just because you put a sentence in a particular ordinance, it doesn't wipe out that person's rights. And you've seen this time and time again in cases. And especially, you see it in panhandling. They have a fundamental First Amendment right to free speech, which it even includes if they're panhandling. We can't make it unconstitutional, and we can't criminalize it. And again, I'm going to ask Aaron, in your memos, you strongly suggest that we not.
I'm sorry, I have to stop.
Okay.
Sorry. I have to stop. I can't recommend that we, absent the direction of the entire council, that we disclose contents of attorney-client privilege communications. I'm sorry.
Well, it's up to the client to decide if they want
It's up to the council to decide whether to waive attorney-client privilege. The council collectively is the client.
Okay. Councilwoman Calabianakis.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, this is kind of a tough one, kind of isn't. 2312, the prohibited solicitation, is fixable. And it's something I recommend we bring up at a future council meeting. But in its current state, it's clearly unconstitutional. I think we all read the same cases, the Reed versus Town of Gilbert. Unlike the previous ordinance that just talked about individuals crossing streets and where it was very neutral as to its application, if you look at this ordinance that we're going to pass, whereas pedestrians, repeated solicitations, this is clearly designated for panhandling. all the courts have held this kind of an ordinance, and people have tried it for years, and they used to accept this, and this used to be okay until the Supreme Court came down and struck them all down. And now there is absolutely no chance constitutionally this thing passes muster, unfortunately. I don't want to be the bad guy, but I've got to look out for this town. That's my number one duty. I don't see solicitation as an issue that is compelling right now, that we have panhandlers all in our streets and we have to deal with this today. But we can deal with this a month from now. We can get it done correctly and wisely, and that's what we should do. In my research, okay, these type of cases, if we lose, and trust me, the ACLU will be on this case, and this will probably make the Arizona Republic, because we'll be now the third municipality to pass an onerous anti-panhandling statute. This will make news statewide, possibly national, and we just can't hide behind, oh, technically this or practically that. No, we're going after panhandlers. It's very obvious to me. So we can fix it. And importantly, in the cases that have been litigated, the plaintiff's attorneys collect their attorney fees from the towns and the municipalities. So when we get sued, we're paying the bill for the person suing us. What would be the plaintiff? Is that what we want to do, knowing that we don't have a chance in court, but we're just going to risk it and then get sued, and then what we'll probably end up doing is strike down the ordinance, drop the charges, and walk away looking foolish, like we didn't know what we were doing, and we weren't aware of the law. And as a lawyer, I can't afford that. It's not right. It's in violation of my oath of office. And so I think what we should do is, I would respectfully look at you, Aaron, if you'd like us to just table or approach this in a future date with the instructions to staff to clean it up and to make this more neutral, like we discussed, like you discussed earlier, Sharon. And you should have been a lawyer, because your analysis was very good. We would have to...
I may quote you with that later on.
We would have to tighten it up to include all solicitation, because right now we're singling somebody out, and we don't do that. And so our town staff could rewrite this so we're not targeting anybody and make it more neutral in nature, and then we could pass it, and then we could do what we want to do.
Can I ask you not to make a motion to table so I can have a chance to speak on this?
I just was asking him what he would think, and Ms. Mayor, I would defer to you what you think.
Thank you.
If you understand my analysis, what you would like to do.
I think when I look at what this is trying to do, it's talking about aggressive behavior. Aggressive behavior is never okay. Feeling threatened or touched or harassed or impeded is never okay. So take out the language about solicitations and take out the language about locations. And we have the law that already exists. I don't really see why we need to do this unless you want to look at making aggressive behavior in general, higher fines, more penalties or whatever. And we've seen a lot of aggressive behavior on all kinds of levels that don't have anything to do with solicitation. So if we want to look at that law that already exists against somebody harassing you or bothering you, then I'm all for that. But you're 100% right. Take solicitation out and take the locations out, because otherwise you're trying to tell someone what they can't say. That's impossible.
Alan, are you okay amending your motion to do that?
We have a motion and a second on the table to pass this as is. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Friedel. Aye. Councilmember Calavianakis.
No.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Yes.
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
No.
Vice Mayor Grisbowski.
Nay.
Mayor Dickey?
No.
It fails.
Our last item on this topic is about urban camping. Aaron?
Mayor and Council, the item before you is Ordinance 2023-13 regarding urban camping. Staff has prepared this ordinance with having had some extensive experience researching these and advising cities and towns on enforcing urban camping ordinances. There are a couple of finer points that I want to put on this ordinance. First, staff does recommend adoption of this ordinance. Urban camping ordinances are permissible, acceptable, even on their face in the courts of law. The caveat to that is that since 2018 or 2019, the Ninth Circuit has put some pretty significant constitutional limitations on urban camping ordinances. Specifically, the bottom line from those cases is that a municipality can enforce them. The municipality can enforce these ordinances, but cannot do so if there's no public place or available shelter reasonably available to an unsheltered person. So in other words, to enforce it, you have to first conduct an individualized assessment to see, is this person in fact involuntarily homeless? Does the person have somewhere else to go, whether by means of a public place where they can go or shelter where they can go? In my view, speaking frankly, it's an unfortunate evolution of case law. It's an unfortunate development that cities and towns across the Ninth Circuit are universally dealing with, including the city of Phoenix. Nevertheless, that's the space that we're dealing in. So I would suggest to the council that in connection with adopting this ordinance, if the council chooses to move forward with adoption, that we also explore ordinances for ensuring that with our facilities in adjacent jurisdictions, that we explore options for making sure that shelter space is available so that we can allow for consistent enforcement of the ordinance. So those are my recommendations.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. First in your packet are written comments, one from Jennifer Brown, and she is for the ordinance. One is from Rory Wilson, who is against the ordinance. One from Liz Gildersleeve, who is for the ordinance, and Patrick Green, who's against it. And he also writes a statement. So you'll want to read that. And then one in-person public comment from Matthew Corrigan.
Madam Mayor, council members, hello again. Urban camping has become a national problem and appears to be increasing. Cities and towns across the country are taking proactive action using ordinances to protect property owners and residents from this new blight and scourge to especially our desirable community and neighborhood. We've seen the dangers of allowing urban camping to be supported and sustained by a city. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and numerous other American cities have become havens for crime, addiction, lawlessness, disease, and filth. In short, city-created slums. The Zone in Phoenix was a prime example of this, with 2,000 vagrant residents living in deplorable conditions until a judge wisely ordered the city to vacate and shut down the area and award all the area businesses, or most of them, and residents, some of them, with financial compensation for damages and reparations. I support Ordinance 2313 because it wisely protects the integrity of Fountain Hills as a highly desirable town, attracting new homeowners, businesses, and visitors. We hear a lot of talk about keeping Fountain Hills attractive, desirable, beautiful. We want to protect what we love. It's a natural instinct. We want to protect it. We want to defend it. This is one way we can do that. And yes, the Ninth Circuit has had an impact across the West where they make these decisions. Not good decisions. The ACLU, in my opinion, makes lousy decisions and files lawsuits against just about everybody. But that's the way it is. There are avenues, as I understand it from my limited research, for cities to work around those by offering alternate venues for those impacted by the need, supposedly, for urban camping. And that would include offering an alternative, not in Fountain Hills, where we have no such development, but other cities. And I don't know how you, as leaders, are going to handle that or compensate it, but referrals are one way. We have close by towns that offer Christian communities that their whole calling is to help solve these problems by helping those people solve their own problems. And through faith or other means, and I'm talking about non-Christian groups, those community efforts are successful. And again, just to repeat myself, the other alternative is almost never successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, thank you, staff, for putting this together. A couple of things that I just want to point out is, just the other day, I was at the Maricopa Government Center. I happened to drop by the recorder's office there. And if you're not familiar with what's going on there, we've got the sheriff's building there. We have the recorder. We have got the clerk. We have a big complex of buildings. And just 2 blocks west of that complex, we have hundreds of people that are living on the right-of-way. Literally, these are not just tents, these are structures. People are like building shanties on these structures, and they're living there. Now, they don't own this property. It's technically right-of-way. But think about if you own the property there, if you own that parcel, what can you do with it? You've got, maybe a dozen people living in front of your property there. If the town or the city isn't going to act, it isn't going to ask those people to leave, or convince them to leave, or motivate them to leave, you have a property that's worth 0. You cannot develop it, you can't do anything with it, and it's a shame. And I don't want that to happen here in Fountain Hills. Now, there's a bit of irony, is that if someone would put up a political sign, code enforcement will come and pick up that sign on right away. Literally, there's people that are watching this video right now who will call or email code enforcement within seconds of seeing a political sign up. Yet, if I steal a shopping cart and I put a lewd message on that shopping cart, I can park it at any right-of-way in town. No one will stop me. No one will stop me. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do need to act on that. There is a double standard here, and that double standard is that we're letting certain people allow our town to become blighted. And that's something that I will not allow, and that's why I make a motion to approve this as drafted.
Any further comments? Sir?
We're not talking about political signs here. We're talking about human beings. And we're talking about urban camping. We just can't arrest ourselves out of this situation. Across the United States, there's a homeless issue. It's bigger than all of us. This isn't a solution. Criminalizing camping is not a solution. It's making it worse. And also, any law regulating the act of sitting, sleeping, lying down, or keeping warm and dry outside on public property must be objectively reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances as applied to all stakeholders, including persons experiencing homelessness. They're a protected class of people. Thus, we can't seem to be looking at, like in our ordinance, we're targeting homelessness. How many homeless people do we have in town? I think through the point in time survey by MAG, and I think even Captain Cratcher mentioned, we have 4 or 5. I personally have not seen them camping. The one incident we had was on state-regulated property, and they handled the situation. We don't even have jurisdiction over that property. There's 2 cases, is my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron. There's the Grants Pass case, and there's the Martin and Idaho case before it. And coupled together, they state, the government cannot criminalize indigent homeless people for sleeping outdoors on public places on the premise that they had a choice in the matter. That happens when they have no access to shelters or adequate alternative shelters in the town or cities in their jurisdiction for those people to go. And basically, the Grants Pass case found that to be tantamount to involuntary homelessness, which is not a criminal act. Per Martin, the government cannot prosecute homeless people for sleeping in public if there is a greater number of homeless individuals in a jurisdiction, the town, than the number of available shelter places. And as a follow-up, Grants Pass, found that there were more individuals within their jurisdiction than there were available shelter beds. So I think that urban camping, I don't think we're just talking about Boy Scouts going out to the lake to camp, etc. We're talking about unsheltered people sleeping and camping in our town, which I have yet to see. Maybe other people have. I haven't seen it. And again, we're criminalizing a human act, and the Grants Pass found that it was in violation of the Eighth Amendment as cruel and unusual punishment for a mere act of sleeping on public property, etc. I think we need to find a solution first, rather than criminalize people sleeping out on public property when they occasionally do here. I have spoken with one or two people today from MAG and other cities and towns, and they are not criminalizing this act. They're providing shelter, and if they can't provide shelter, then they're providing access to other shelters, and/or they are contracting or agreeing with hotels in and out of their area, that if the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department encounters somebody that happens to be unsheltered and may be sleeping on the sidewalk or whatever, then they can work together, and versus automatically criminalizing that person for sleeping on the sidewalk and putting him in jail or fining him $2,500, they help find a solution for it, and they refer him out. The men's shelter out here, I know that the Sheriff's Department has referred them out. However, they have a strict intake. They can only intake people in the morning. Also, CAS and other areas have lengthy intake processes for 2 or 3 days. They can't immediately take that person. So therefore, that person remains unsheltered in a protected class. So I would like to work with a solution versus criminalizing this and bring it back later on. I'd like to work with the town manager and the mayor to consider and think about possibly agreeing and providing some type of access to alternate shelter in our town, as Grants Pass provides, so that this type of ordinance, if we eventually pass it, will stand up to constitutional scrutiny, because others have failed because they haven't done that. And this is a serious, and I'm not making little of this situation. It is a serious problem. It's a human problem. It's not a criminal problem. And I would like Mesa and other towns, and even Scottsdale, to work together to provide a solution versus automatic arrest of a person for sleeping on the sidewalk. Thank you.
Aaron, can you address some of that, please?
Yes, I think so.
Specifically, why you feel comfortable recommending that we pass this?
Well, and I'll note that, by the way, when there was a second, just for the record, there was a second from Councilmember Toth. At least I think there was. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just so that's clear for the record. The reason I'm comfortable with adopting an urban camping ordinance is that no case has ever said that an urban camping ordinance is unconstitutional. It can be unconstitutional as applied when you fail to do the individualized assessment to say, is the person here involuntarily, and is shelter reasonably available to that person? If there is shelter reasonably available to that person, whether that's going to a family member's home, whether that's going to another public place to sleep, whether that's going to an actual shelter space, it is acceptable to enforce, to cite and enforce under proposed 2313. I will note that the other reason that I'm more comfortable with this, and I don't want to put words in Larry's mouth, I just know how it has worked in other jurisdictions that we represent. We typically start with a work with the individual approach. The idea behind these ordinances is very rarely to arrest the person in the first instance. At least with the things that I've worked with, the jurisdictions I've worked with, including with MCSO in other jurisdictions, arrest is last resort, not the first resort. So the idea is to try to connect the person with services. And if necessary, and the person refuses to move along from the space where he or she is located, then civil citation or arrest becomes on the table. But it's more of a last resort than what you lead out with. And I think that's just typical in police work, and I'm getting a nod from Larry in the back. I'm not a police officer, but I've worked with him enough to know that.
You said civil, so is this different than the others?
So this is civil. It's a civil penalty punishable in accordance with our code, except that criminal sanctions can apply for habitual offenders. So if you get a repeat offender coming back, we can escalate it.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Actually, you had your light on first.
I just have them all here, so I don't know.
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor, and therefore Mayor. Thank you, Aaron, as well. And just to also talk about those points, my understanding is we already give a not insignificant amount of money to a New Leaf. Is that correct?
I'm really glad you asked, because part of this conversation tonight is exactly what Aaron just articulated, is that if the ordinance passes, we need to have a shelter space as or an alternate location, or some sort of reasonable place that they can relocate to. Otherwise, the ordinance is not enforceable. That being said, we have not committed this year's budget allocation to any particular space. So the New Leaf that you just mentioned was where we put it last year. We have not moved forward with any dedicated space for that yet. So where I was going to say, and I appreciate you bringing it up, was if this passes tonight, I will assume that that is something we'll probably need to investigate and potentially look at using those funds for that purpose.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, for that clarification. And in that case, yes, my understanding would be that we have the certain amount of money allocated in our budget for somebody, whoever that might be. But as long as we're under the understanding that we'll be looking into that, and that, again, as Aaron mentioned, it's not an automatic arrest. We're not trying to ruin lives here. We're just trying to provide the correct avenues for people to be able to help themselves and for us to be able to help them. When we talk about urban camping, there are safety issues there. We are well aware of a recent complaint that we all on this dais received photos of that was very close to a school. That's not something that I take lightly, and I imagine that my fellow councilmen feel the same. We don't know. That's why we pass ordinances like this. I don't know if someone is homeless. I don't know if they're just urban camping. I don't know if they're there for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, and I really don't want to fail on the end of them being there for the wrong reason. That is a very short version of a very convoluted and nuanced issue, but with that, I'm done commenting.
Vice Mayor?
This probably won't be very popular, but I wanted to let you guys know that I do know of 2 unhomed people in town that sleep on private property with the permission of the owner. I do know of 2 of those. So we discussed that the question is shelter reasonably available? Do we have real-time data showing where beds are available, and how are we going to get them there?
So two-part answer to your two-part question, Councilmember. The first question was, do we have real-time data? The answer is no. There isn't a centralized database of available shelter beds that shows you in real time who has what available. There are a lot of reasons for that. Some of the reasons are different shelters serve different populations. There are shelters for men, shelters for women, shelters for families, shelters for domestic violence victims, all sorts of things. So it's not like they're all collaborating to say, here's what we have and here's what another space has. The way that it typically works, and maybe this is where I'll ask Larry to maybe address some of your additional concerns. The way that it typically works is you connect with a provider, either in Mesa or in Phoenix or in a neighboring jurisdiction, where the city or town has an agreement with that provider to say, in exchange for X, you will give us Y number of guaranteed beds, whether it's one or more, right? And so we know that when we make that call, the person on the other end can say, yes, we are aware of the contractual agreement that we have with you, and there is a shelter space available. So for a smaller jurisdiction like ours, where you're not dealing with this on a day in and day out basis, that's how it works. You make a phone call, they answer, yeah, we've got a space available, come on down. In the larger jurisdictions, in your Phoenix and Mesas and other places, it's a much more complicated process that we don't need to get into tonight. But for our purposes, it's a matter of calling our contracted provider. That's what it would be.
Okay. I kind of feel like it's putting my business hat on. I cannot guarantee you 2 beds as the town of Fountain Hills, because you may go for 3 weeks and not need them. Well, I've got these 2 empty beds here that I can fill. So, and I realize that it's a business owner, it's a completely different conversation, but to say we have guaranteed beds, I feel like that's difficult for these kinds of facilities, because it's just not fair to them that there are 2 empty beds and then there's 2 people in Mesa that could fill those beds.
Yeah. To respond to your question, at least now we're treading into an area that I know less about in terms of like how they coordinate with each other. But I do know that in some instances, at least I can recall one, where if there's not, because in fairness, they have shelter beds available, they want to fill them. They're a shelter, they're there for that purpose. If it's full, I've known a situation where they've called a neighboring shelter and said, do you have another space available where you could accommodate this person, or where we could transition another individual to another location? So it's that cooperation does exist. I don't know to what degree between any 2 particular providers, but that level of cooperation exists to where they can share information if it's, oh shoot, we gave away the bed that we had guaranteed to Fountain Hills or to Scottsdale or to whoever it is, that they'll come back and say, there might be one available somewhere else. Let's figure it out.
So how are we going to get them there?
Rachel?
At this point, we've been working with MCSO. If they have an unhoused person who is willing and agrees to head to a shelter or to seek services, MCSO has worked with us to get them there. They've been willing to provide that. However, it's not, because it hasn't been often, it's not something that we're doing on an nightly basis or multiple times throughout the day or whatnot. So through MCSO's support, we've been able to do it that way.
Okay, that is good to hear, and I know we've got Taryn working with the MCO. I don't remember what her job is, but hopefully there's somebody available 24 hours a day that can help coordinate that kind of stuff, and they can work with the other facilities. I was having a conversation with somebody about homeless specifically, and they're all criminals, was basically, no, that's exactly what she said to me. And I want to remind everybody that being unhomed is not illegal. Everybody is 1 paycheck away from being homeless. There are horror stories just in the Phoenix Valley area, especially during COVID, where people got put into the hospital and kicked out of their apartment and didn't have family to help them, and they get out of the hospital and have no house. So I do firmly believe we're all 1 paycheck away from it happening. That being said, you can't assume they're all criminals either. You don't know who your neighbor is. If you look at the sex offender list, as of June 16th, we had 6 total registered to the 85268 zip code. 4 are level 2, which is moderate risk of reoffending, and 2 are level 3, which is a high risk of another sex crime. If you look at the warrants, again, as of June 16th, we had 60 people with warrants who used the Fountain Hills zip code as their last known address. So, and I'm not accusing everybody of calling these people criminals. I'm just reminding you that you don't know who your neighbor is, just like you don't know who the unhomed person is that's on the street. That being said, I truly appreciate that you came knowing how we're going to get them there, and that we have the ability to send them somewhere, and that this is the kind of thing that's defensible. I feel like, as much as I don't want to do this, I feel like we have heard from enough people. The only thing that really turns me off is the whole remain in a sitting position. I kind of have a problem with, so they go use the park. What is going to indicate that they're homeless? The fact that the guy brings his cart, or he looks like a criminal. That I really have a problem with. Otherwise, I think I can see going with this, because that seems to be where people want to go. Thank you.
Finally. Aaron, thanks for clearing up a couple things, because I had also wanted to mention that we don't look to put people in jail on our first contact with people. We try to work with them. And I have twice now, this is the 3rd time, I said that we should have performance metrics tied to any donations or contributions that we make to these shelters, so that we know that they're available to help the people that need help in our town. So I still think that that's something that we need to follow up on and make that part of our process as well.
I think Alan was first.
Whatever you want.
You want to speak?
There was just a couple follow-ups that I had, and one of them, so I have personally toured and investigated a few of these shelters, and there are nights that those shelters fill up, but that's not every night. So there is some availability, and this is not Fountain Hills is still a very moderate problem. It's not pervasive. This is not going to be a phone call we make every night. And because of the fact it doesn't fill every single night, the odds are that there's going to be some availability on those nights. Now, one of the shelters that I've investigated personally will pick people up. There's also another organization that'll transport people to a shelter. So that's 2 options for transporting people. But there's something else, and we can actually get into the 9th District ruling, is I've had conversations with some of these people, and they flat out refuse to go to shelter. They flat out refuse. They would rather live in a certain situation they have than go to a shelter. Well, that's not defensible. That's not something that that is that violates that ruling. If they refuse to go to shelter, that's a completely different situation. And every single person I've asked that question to has refused. So that tells me something, that it's not we're not imposing something that is over the top here. This is reasonable, and I don't think any business owner here in Fountain Hills wants access to their business blocked by a shanty, by a tent, by people. Even if they're just in a tent hanging out, it's intimidating for customers. That's right away. It's designed for the public to use. It's not designed to be building structures, and this is what this is about. This is the idea of criminalizing someone sleeping on a bench is not true, and it's inherently dishonest to claim that it is. This is about people manipulating the system and taking advantage of the right-of-way and taking it from us, the people. And that's what this is about.
The only thing I was going to follow up was to say, with respect to someone declining shelter when shelter space is available, I agree that that doesn't run afoul of any Ninth Circuit precedent. If there is shelter space available and they decline, they're not involuntarily homeless anymore. They're voluntarily there, and we do have the ability to cite pursuant to whatever ordinance we adopt. I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, number 3, the urban camping. You know my test. Is it constitutional? Is it going to pass muster or not? That's my test. I know some of what we're passing tonight, some people might think are tough ordinances, and some probably don't think they're tough enough. But I would tend to be more for the tougher ordinances, but they're on this side of the constitutional line. It's unfortunate that the last prohibited solicitation, we didn't follow Jerry's advice and just tweak that a little bit, and we could have had that one passed tonight, so that's unfortunate. But that's old business. Let's move on to urban camping. This, unlike the previous ordinance, this does apply to individuals, okay? It does not call out or pertain specifically to panhandlers or homeless or anything. It's neutral in its origin. It's neutral in its ordinance. The Municipal Research Services Organization, MRSC, has issued a letter saying that what we're proposing to do tonight is constitutional. If you look at Tempe's urban camping ordinance, which was passed in 1997, updated in 2018, is still in working order. If you look at Phoenix's, even though for what it is, they do have an ordinance against urban camping, and right now they're trying to address that. Fountain Hills has shown good faith in the fact that we have been funding the New Leaf Center to the tune of approximately $40,000, $50,000. So we're in the spirit of the law of where we can relocate these people. That's very good. This urban camping, I mean, we had a homeless person that went to state trust land, paid the permit, and was up there. And when the sheriff's office came up there, he showed him the permit. And he said, "I'm here legally." And so we're not trying to do anything untoward. We just don't want them camping here unlawfully. But if they want to go outside our jurisdiction, go ahead. Or if they want to pay the permit, go ahead. So it's not like they don't have any options. They don't have a job, probably. They can just walk over there and then walk back into town the next day. So I did like Alan, and Alan made a good point about other facilities that are available to bridge that gap. And there are services that will pick them up. If you Google homeless shelters, the list is voluminous. Central AZ Shelter, Cass Family Shelter, Homeless Haven, U Mom New Day, Phoenix Rescue Mission, Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Lodestar, Cots Men's Shelter, Bridge to Hope. It goes on and on. There's many, many. So it's not like we're just going to throw the people out on the street. There's plenty of places to take them. And I do agree with Alan, too, that a lot of these people, they simply like the lifestyle, and they don't want to live under four walls and with somebody else's rules. And so that is their option, but it's not going to be their option to pitch a tent in our park and to tell us to go to hell. And so I think this passes the constitutional muster test. It's neutral. And so I would be for adopting, approving the ordinance 2023 urban camping, and I would like to make a motion to do so.
Yeah, I think one already.
Oh, we do? Okay, good.
Just one comment about the people refusing to go to the shelters. Help should not come with a catch, whether it be a religion or treatment. It should not be a requirement. So a lot of times you're going to find that the homeless refuse it because many of the shelters come with a catch. I think that should be part of our issue, is our shelters should be catch-free. And I realize that that's hard to explain to the people, that this is where you're going, there isn't a catch, there is no expected treatment. The goal of the shelter should be, get them in the shelter, get them showered, now what do you need? Watch my stuff while I go apply for a job, kind of thing. The whole problem of you have to go through treatment or you have to learn to pray the way I want you to pray, that's what is the turnoff to many of these people.
So that you raised actually a couple of very good points, Councilmember. The first is that in Martin v. City of Boise, it specifically says that if someone doesn't want to go to a religiously affiliated shelter, a municipality can't compel them to do that. So that's just necessarily a part of it. A lot of the shelters around the valley, some have pretty strong restrictions. Some are low to no barrier shelters. In other words, some are, they come, they stay, and the idea is to transition them out of the low to no barrier shelter to get them into a more full-blown service model. So that's certainly something that I think we can look at, and I don't know that we'd actually struggle to find that a low to no barrier shelter option. We may, but I don't know that we will. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there just seems to be a little bit of a wanting it both ways, because we got criticized for the 40,000 to a new leaf, which was a good option and an alternative at the time. We found out there were some shortcomings, and that's why this year we're looking elsewhere. I believe we understand that by giving a gift to one of these shelters is not the same as having a contract, so we may have to look at having a contract where, yes, and if you don't have if that particular one doesn't have a bed, then they have to find one for you. But again, this is a very rare occurrence here in town. But we probably end up looking at something like that with a different shelter, because that one did have some issues about when they could go in and such. The other thing, well, two kind of just wording things, I think, like Sharon said, so remaining in a sitting position, I don't get that one. So you're sitting on the curb waiting to get picked up by your mother or something, and you're wearing a, whatever teenagers might wear or whatever somebody might wear who's out running and needs to be picked up. That seems like an odd one to me, sitting position, remaining in a sitting position. And the other one is about Aaron or Rachel, like as far as sleeping in the park during the day. So, you bring in a blanket like we see and such, and how do you deal with that aspect of it? And so those are kind of more mundane things. But so the sitting part, what to do about parks. I think we're good with the shelter as far as what we'll look for. But along with what Sharon was talking about, Vice Mayor, the idea that somebody is bad or evil or whatever because they're in this situation and dangerous, and they were and gently, Councilwoman, that they were by the school. I think they were by the school for years, and there was no intent there or record. I think the arrest ended up being because of something that happened several years ago, of like using a restroom or something. So I just want to kind of bring that discussion back on what we're talking about. I agree, nobody wants the urban camping and the such, and we don't want to ruin the property values of businesses that people can't get into their business. So those are all legitimate, but we need to just be careful not to categorize things in a way that, like Sharon said, we don't know anybody that might be living by a school or anywhere else. So, and then Mr. Corrigan mentioned faith-based help, but then said, but not here. So that was just it was just kind of, well, you originally said, well, they need a shelter, but not in Fountain Hills. And it was kind of like, I think a lot of people think like that, but we have a lot of churches and such here, and it's possible that a church may want to help out and do the things and get the services and have a full-fledged way to get out of this this way of life. So I don't think we should act like our churches shouldn't do that, or our churches are somehow above doing what other churches are doing in other places. This is the whole reason we got involved with MAG, is because it's a regional issue. I think we have something that we can agree to pass here, but some of the conversation, I think, need to take a look at ourselves a little bit. Anyway, and if that's funny, I'm sorry, but we have churches here, and they could serve people. And so anyway, I think we have a motion and a second. I still not sure about the sitting part on a curb and the sleeping part in a park.
I mean, motion and second on the floor. If someone wants to make a motion to amend to eliminate that language, I don't have any objection to it. Just follow the amendment procedure to get a motion and a second, and vote on that to see if it passes.
I think the sitting part is, the sleeping part might take care of itself because the park's closed at 11, so that might be okay. But if anybody would be willing to entertain taking out the sitting, what is it, remaining in sitting position part, I think that might help some situations.
Oh, point of order, doesn't the originating motion take precedent?
No. So according to Robert's rules and our rules of procedure, if there ever is an amendment on the floor, you vote on whether you're going to take up that amendment. If it fails, take up the main motion. If it passes, the main motion is amended to include the amendment. Okay.
Well, first you vote on the amendment, and then if that passes, then you vote again on the main motion. Okay.
So yes, I would like to make an amendment to remove the remain in a sitting position clause.
Fair enough. We need a second.
Do you want to second that? No? Okay. I mean, I suppose I could second it, but I can see where it's going, so I'll second it. I've never made a motion or seconded anything, but I guess I will.
That's fine. So now we just vote on the amendment, and if it fails, we proceed with voting on the main motion. If it passes, the main motion will be amended.
Yes, and we can discuss the amendment, which is to just remove the phrase "remaining in a sitting position on a public street, alley, lane, parkway, or other right-of-way, or whether such right-of-way has been dedicated to the public in fee or by easement." So if we pass it without the amendment, then sitting in any of those places will be a civil offense. Please roll call vote on the amendment.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
No.
Councilmember Toth.
No.
Councilmember McMahon.
Yay.
Councilmember Friedel.
Nay.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Nay.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Yes.
Yes, I like sitting on curbs, but it failed.
Mayor.
So we will vote on the main motion unless there's any more discussion. Okay.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Yes.
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Yay.
Councilmember Friedel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Nay.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye.
It passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is about a parking analysis. Justin?
Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to bring a reminder of this item that it's actually what Justin's going to be talking about is a result of the 2020 general plan, which was approved by our voters. Keeping in mind that it is a plan, there are a number of action items in there, but we're not beholden to them. They are goals and objectives that help direct staff and council. So tonight's discussion is related to goal 4 in that general plan, which indicates an effort to assess our required parking capacity in our parking facilities downtown and make recommendations based on best practices. So I think Justin's going to get into the details for us.
Thank you. Imagine, if you would, that about every 7.5 to 8 years, a discussion comes about the general plan amendment. There are a large number of volunteers that put forth effort towards the general plan. Whenever it's finally agreed to, it goes to the voters. A spinoff from the general plan that directly impacts the staff is the strategic plan. In this particular case, the strategic plan assigns this responsibility to the Public Works Director and the Development Services Director. What the voters decided, primarily based on special events and other activities where there is limited parking, is that the town should spend a little money to see what, if anything, could be done, primarily in the town center. That is this side of Panorama, including but not limited to Fountain Park. from El Lago north to Palisades and La Montana. So that general area there referred to as the town center. During any well-attended special event, we are all aware of the challenges that we face. If approved, and this goes forward, the assessment will identify what we may or may not be able to do in partnering with business owners and private parking lot owners, which by default are businesses and or plat owners or NPOAs or neighborhood business associations. It's challenging, especially for a couple of our marquee events that the town actually puts on, which is the Turkey Trot. Very, very popular. Basically down to zero parking, including but not limited to all of the private parking. The other one that is immensely popular is the 4th of July. This is going to take all that into consideration. I think it's important to note that this is part of the 2020 general plan. We discussed it with the town manager numerous times at several meetings, nearly every month. And each time I was asked, you making any progress? No, sir, I have not. Most recently, it's turned ma'am. The reason is it took 2.5 years to get anybody that would be willing to look at it because it's a relatively low dollar threshold in a location that is not readily available and accessible to most. And on that point, I would like to point out, this is within the town manager's authority to approve this contract and move forward. I was uncomfortable with that, so I brought it to the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Committee some months ago and explained my concerns about that, primarily around transparency, and it's still an expenditure from the town budget. That body opted to come forward to the mayor and council based on recommendations from the town manager and myself. That's why we're here tonight, is we want to know your opinion on how you would like to proceed with this expenditure and obviously the outcome, which is a parking assessment, and the direction that comes from that written document is likely to include future funding, and it could be a multi-year horizon depending on the ambitions and recommendations. With that, I'll do my best to answer any questions I can.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards on this?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Director, on this. And so one thing, there's going to be actually 3 points I'm going to have. So the first one is 361 days a year, we have abundance of parking spots in this town. And in my experience, I don't drastically change our plans, or we make special nuances for such a small percentage of the time. This is, it is an issue on 4 days a year, but only on 4 days a year. So I don't see it as a huge need, and so I'm concerned about that. So the next thing, if I was going to ask staff to print out every study we've done in the past decade, we would have papers stacked to the ceiling filling this entire room. We're not just talking dozens, probably hundreds of studies, millions of dollars spent on studies. And the majority of those studies, unused, unapproved, it was just money that was spent. I see this as yet another one that we're going to spend money on this, and it really isn't going to affect us. And even if it did affect us, 4 days a year. But here, really, I think is what this absolutely kills this with me, and why I'm going to be an absolute no vote. So I do a little research on this company that's doing the study, or proposing to do the study, and sure enough, on their website, I find that they promote road diets. Literally, they have a road diet plan on their website, and they talk about a road diet is a reconfiguration to reduce motor vehicle travel. This is the company that we want to give us a roadmap for what we want to do in our town. I just don't see that. Frankly, these guys are more interested in their DEI score than serving the needs of Fountain Hills residents. And for that reason, I'm going to be a no. And just a moment ago, I saw a staff member make a face. How inappropriate. And I will remember that.
Councilwoman?
The first thing that I want to address here is thank you, Justin, for choosing to be especially transparent, this being something that you didn't technically have to put before us. And same goes to Rachel. Thank you for that. The second thing I want to address is that I fully disagree with the 4 days a year statement that my fellow councilman just gave. Off the top of my head, the Fountain Festival is 6 days a year, 8 if we count setup, which we should count setup, as town staff is probably well aware. Concourse in the Hills, I believe that's 2 days. Oktoberfest, that's every other year now, but that is 2 days when it does happen. We've got 4th of July, Thanksgiving. What else do we have? Ballet Under the Stars had a pretty good crowd this year. And Music Fest. This is all just off of the top of my head. And I'm already well past 4. And with this town, I see a lot of passion and a lot of pride in this community where we're probably gonna only grow on annual events from our nonprofits, from we're talking about the reality of what this Dark Sky Discovery Center is going to hold for the town, and that's gonna need parking. The one note I'll have is that I would, if the conversation has not already happened, if I'm already saying something that's occurred, go ahead and ignore me, Justin. But if the conversation hasn't already happened, to bring up the Dark Sky Discovery Center with them when they are studying of, you know, off of your experience, how many people might this bring to town and what can we do to accommodate parking for that area. That is also part of town center. I know it's not the Plat 208 4 squares that we're probably focusing on, but my point being is our town center area, we do need to talk about parking. We have tons of events in this town and parking becomes a #1 complaint. I absolutely loved Concourse in the Hills. It was an incredible event. I so look forward to the next one. Driving around town while Concourse in the Hills was happening, not fun. I'm just gonna say it, I'm not that good of a driver. It was kind of scary. My point being is, yeah, thank you. I will leave the parking lot first. Besides that little joke, my point in all of this is that the less cars on the parking on the street, the better. Let's find ways to solve our parking issues, even if it is only 20 days a year or so.
Madam Mayor, Council Member, if I may address one of her questions. In fact, not only the International Dark Sky Discovery Center, but a 5 to 10 year horizon will be looked at based on where we're at and where we're moving, not only in the general plan, but the strategic plan, and also for those looking at undeveloped parcels or the potential for those parcels.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Justin, for your presentation. I appreciate it, and I agree with Councilmember Toth. We have a parking problem. It's going to get worse with the Dark Sky Center. I think this is appropriate. It's beyond just looking at the parking problem. It's looking at the downtown, you know, parking on the street, the whole 9 yards. The fact of the matter is Fountain Hills is growing. Our businesses are growing. There's development and redevelopments going on. There is going to constantly be a need for more parking. Also, as for the comment that Councilmember Skillicord made about the waste of studies, and we have stacks and stacks of them that are valueless, I have to disagree with that. Listening to you and the other town members over the past couple of years about the warrants and about the studies that are required by different governmental entities to get funding, et cetera, I don't believe that they're a waste. In addition, I think we have contracted with with Kimley and Harn before on matters, or no?
Madam Mayor, council member, that is correct.
Yes.
It's a different division, which kind of muddies the water.
So-
This group is out of Ohio.
Right, and we're not the only town or city that contracts with them. They're a reputable business. So I disagree with some of those negative comments. And I think this is a really good idea. It's in concert with the plan, and I think that we need to have it done. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, this first came to my attention because I am on the Streets and Safety Commission. And when this first came up, I thought, I'm probably a no on this. That's a lot of money. But I'm glad I had the heads up because it gave me a chance to think about it. And I talked to stakeholders and business people in the community, and I asked them about parking issues. And believe it or not, even though I kind of see Alan's point that we only have a number of big events a year, parking is a concern to the business owners and to people. We are a tourist town, and we hope to expand that tourism. The Dark Sky Discovery Center, it turns a page on parking. And so, yeah, I'm kind of leaning with Councilwoman Toth and Councilwoman McMahon that on initial blush, I was against it. But upon reflection, I think it's a good thing. And also, I'd just like to thank our town manager for taking a project that was under $50,000, but just wanting to get the council's input on that. I think that's really good governance, and I appreciate you bringing that before council tonight. But I would be a yes.
Justin, the review here says a review of current and past relevant studies. When was the last parking study done?
Madam Mayor, council member, I've not been able to find one. There have been traffic studies or assessments that were part of developments, and some of those touched slightly on parking, but that primarily focused on the applicant and or the development itself. And so they will certainly take that into account. I don't want to single out any development nearby in the town center, but there are several of them that are squeezed for space, if we can say that without offending anyone to the best of my ability this late at night.
I guess I see the need for some analysis, but I sure don't like that price tag. You're already telling me that we have a squeezed for space thing going on in town. Do we need them to tell us that too?
Asking them to tell us that, we're asking them to use their professional opinion to show us or provide to us the direction of how we could possibly alleviate it or work out a long-term multiple phase solution to implement it. So again, they're going to provide some guidance and options, and then those will come back to the elected body after staff has a chance to review.
So we don't have any staff that's qualified to do that, like our town engineer or other people that could do that for us?
If it was just a single person council member, or maybe 1.5, I would agree. This is probably a half dozen people and hours and hours. And I have an incredible amount of confidence in the limited staff we have. I'm just not sure that we could accomplish this goal in a timely manner.
Vice Mayor?
I have heard for years complaints about parking and that we need to build a parking garage. Unless we have a study that's looking at new apartments that are going in and that's looking at dark sky that is coming in and is looking at other things that we have the ability, the space to still build downtown, I don't think you can answer to these people. That being said, isn't this also necessary to be in line with our general plan to have a study?
It is. That's where this originated.
Okay, so I'm actually ready to move to approve as written so that we can meet our general plan.
Second.
Thank you. Could I speak, please? Oh, okay, go ahead.
You know, we've got a big parking lot sitting down at Target that we could use with a shuttle for any event that we have in town, too. I don't think we've ever done that, have we? Does anybody know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I know of either. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time digesting the 48,000 for this one. We have a parking lot that's down there that's 80% empty all the time. And it's very easy to get a little shuttle, and then you give people a tour of the town, too.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember, and I don't want to disrupt the proceeding here. We will certainly discuss this in the event that it moves forward tonight. Keep in mind that that area has multiple different owners, and each of those owners would need to be willing to enter into an agreement. And my experience has shown that very few property owners are willing to donate something they consider of value. So there most likely would be a fee.
Yeah, it's private property, so that kind of goes hand in hand with some of the other discussions we've had. Councilman Skillicorn, I think I don't want to be wrong, but I think you said 99% of the studies we've done have not been used. I've lived here 40 years, and believe me, the planning that goes into not only our own town, but what MAG does, who I know that you don't have high esteem for. We wouldn't have a 202, we wouldn't have a 101, we wouldn't have extra lanes on the 10. These are forward-thinking people with degrees in that, engineers, whatever, and that's what they do. They plan areas, municipalities. That's what they learn, and unless that is meaningless and you think we can sit up here and decide these things ourselves on every study, on every traffic study, on every park, it just doesn't make sense. We talk about staff. That's part of being in a small town. We don't have the staff to do the traffic studies that we want. We want the developers to come in, but we don't have the staff to take care of this. So this is how you'll look forward. And it is in the general plan that was voted, that was discussed for a long time with a lot of different groups, and then voted on and approved by our community. The Kimley Horn thing, they've been doing stuff with us. Maybe it's a different division, I don't know. But we've been doing a ton with them for years and years and years. And if we're going to look at the websites of everything, of everybody that we do business with to see if they say Black Lives Matter or something, we're going to be in trouble. We use them for what they do for their clients. And if a client wants a skinnier road or more sidewalks or bicycles, that's what they're going to do for them. They're going to do for us what we are hiring them to do. So I'm 100% for this. I think we have a motion and a second. And unless you have anything to say, about that, which is fine, we could be ready to vote. It's up to you. All right. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Councilmember Friedel.
Aye.
Councilmember Calabianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Nay.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye.
It passes.
Thank you. Our next item is kind of along the same lines. It's a traffic signal that's been planned for a long time. Is that, yeah. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually, staff is coming back to you to ask you to approve a final design. This originally came before the mayor and council in the fall of 2019, 2020. At that time, an assessment of the intersection of Palisades and Eagle Ridge was requested. And I think it's important to note this right now. The town staff did not go out to Eagle Ridge and Palisades. The assessment of that intersection was based on feedback received by the mayor and council and staff, and was part of a collaborative discussion that went on for a considerable amount of time about the best approach. At that time, staff brought forward an agreement to do an assessment of that intersection that resulted in a warrant analysis We know for a fact, after having discussed this several times, we met several of those warrants. And I met with a gentleman just yesterday to discuss this over a glass of tea, and he's just cannot believe that there's 1,000 vehicles a day in that intersection. I want to note that the equipment and technology used for vehicle counting is up to date and state of the art. We are not the only ones that solicit this service, not only from this company, but several others, but also MAG uses this equipment for their regional counts. I have absolute faith in the data, that the information that was provided to us by Kimberly Horn is accurate. I would also like to note, this is another one of those items that the town manager and I have been having a considerable amount of discussion about. This is currently in the budget that was adopted for this year. There is currently a valid contract for this. Simply could have sent a notice to proceed and moved forward. It's a small dollar threshold. Again, we have budget and contract authority. We think it's best, she and I, to bring this forward because of the discussions that have been had in the past and comments that we've heard not only from the residents, but from the elected body. Here's an opportunity for each of you to share your opinions and provide direction to staff related to this intersection, which again is just a final design, not approval for construction. With that, I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. In your packet, you have one written comment, well, no comment, just that they're against it, and that's from Liz Gildersleeve. And then we do have one in-person comment, and that's from Barry Wolborski.
Yes, I'm Barry Wolborski still, and I'm double dipping tonight. I'm opposed to spending the funds to finish the engineering study for a traffic signal that we don't need on Palisades and Eagle Ridge, that we will not build, and it poses a huge danger to the citizens of this town. And I'm going to give you my reasoning. The staff summary that Justin talked about and the warrants that he talked about have to be met if you may have a signal. Not that you should have a signal, that you may have a signal. So once the warrants are met, then you're allowed to have a signal. The first is 75 vehicles per hour. That's about 1.25 vehicles a minute. I think Phil's Restaurant probably has more than that on an average lunchtime. The second warrant is that there has to be 400 cars an hour for 4 hours. I have a great deal of problems with this. You know, I've spoken about statistics to this council before, you may remember, or you may not. I would be very interested to see when these, I agree with them. I think the equipment is wonderful, I think it's accurate, and I think it's people that run the equipment. And I would really be interested to see when these figures were taken. Were they taken in August or were they taken in January? Are they taken on the day of the concourse or are they taken some other day? I have a real hard time believing that 1,600 cars go through that intersection in a 4-hour period. And the reason I have a hard time with that is because I'm a statistics guy, and that tells me that 10% of all the people in Fountain Hills went through that intersection in a 4-hour period. I don't think so. Now for legal issues. ARS 12.820.03 gives municipalities immunity from road design if the road has met acceptable standards when built, with the exception that if the road has become obsolete, warning signs are there. We have signs, they're called stop signs, and I don't think it's obsolete anyway. So I don't think we can get sued for anything that happened. I did some research on it. I wasn't able to find anybody that got sued for not having a stoplight. So I think that's not an issue. However, if the study is completed and says that we should have a stoplight, I don't know if that applies anymore. Lastly, but most importantly, is safety. I've never seen a vehicle go through that four-way stop at full speed. But with a green light, they're all going to be going through that intersection at 4 speed. And the poor guy turning south out of that intersecting street is going to get creamed. And it's not going to be fender benders. It's going to be fatalities. That's all I got. Thanks.
Any more? No?
That's it.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Justin, can you talk about we've talked about the warrants before, et cetera, that are saying that a stoplight is needed here now, and with the growth of Adero Canyon, the growth of our town, et cetera, and in the future. This is we've already spent a lot of money on the design. This is the balance of that due to complete the design. It's not to put a traffic light in there. It's basically to have a design for one, because we know one is needed now and will be needed in the future, correct? And it is in the budget, right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, that is correct. It's also important to note that while it's a little bit over the original estimate for design that was discussed back with the original developer a little bit more than 25 years ago, they did deposit $50,000 in the town's account for the eventual design and construction. Of course, and to be fair, in those days, a traffic signal was less than $500,000. Nowadays, a traffic signal, realistically at that location, is $1 million. But the answer to your question is, we have met the warrants, so we're completing the design. The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, and the Federal Highway Administration provides guidance on what a municipal, county, state, or federal government should do when the warrants have been met. And the previous speaker is correct. The word shall is not in that direction. It's should. So the word shall build a traffic signal isn't in there. It also doesn't discuss the time frame. It just simply states you've now met these warrants and you are aware of the fact that you need a traffic signal. You need to put forth a plan to design and eventually construct that. And the reason there's not any time constraints is obviously we're multiple years into this one in discussion and design.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Some of what I'm going to ask you, I think we've already discussed many, many months ago, but just to refresh our memories, on the final design, would this be valid, say if we put off this project for 3 to 5 years? Would this design still be good, or would they come up with another obstruction like the emergency vehicles problem that we had? I'm just wondering if we spend the money, we finish the study, but if we don't build the light for 5 years, are we going to have to do another study?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, an additional assessment will not be required. So the sealed plans are basically the life of a traffic signal, even if it's not constructed. The only thing that is likely to change is the technology, and with all due respect to those in my industry, not very quickly. The biggest change we've had is going to digital controllers and also conflict monitors, and a few years back, finally getting away from incandescent and going to LED. So once we pay for this, it is ours and basically stays that way until we build it. And the only time that we would need that engineer of record to come back is if we wanted to make a modification to say the traffic signal at Saguaro and Palisades to put in a protected left. That same engineer of record from that time would look at that intersection and say, okay, I agree or disagree, or his or the direction. So the plans are the plans. Once they're approved, they're ours, and they remain valid for the life of the signal.
Okay, thank you for that. And then also in the packet, it mentions grant funding. And again, this is $1 million project. What are the likely prospects of getting grant funding for this project, at least partial grant funding?
For the ones that are currently being released, we're not seeing much of an opportunity there. It's very difficult to predict what the future will bring. Neighboring agencies have been able to apply and receive grant funding in numbers that would really make us excited to come back and tell you we got, but it includes hawk signals, traffic signals, and crossing primarily. Most of what is being focused on now is pedestrian safety. And so they're willing to pay for those types of signals and the modifications to the roadway to accomplish that.
Are there many pedestrians in that intersection?
We did not count the pedestrians as part of this. I will say that Fountain Hills is one of the most active, smaller communities around. One only need to be out in the early morning during.
But at that location?
There are people that walk there, but I wouldn't know. But when I'm referencing the grants that are available, the grants that we looked at so far that we didn't qualify for actually went to municipal governments that were putting in different types of traffic signals, primarily for pedestrians. In the future, we will continue to look for every grant opportunity to either offset or cover the majority of the cost for something like this.
Of course, thank you. And then my last inquiry would be what Barry talked about, the difference between shall, we know, should, we know. When they say that the warrants indicate that we should, would you explain, would you just drill down on that a little bit?
I'm going to drill down on it without getting into an incredible amount of detail on the record. Basically, we are aware of the fact that we are not meeting a level of service, and we were just a tiny bit short of not meeting one of the warrants, which is the crash data. Had it not been for a recent pandemic, we most likely would have met that. Once that is established, there are specialized firms out there whose clients may or may not crash in our intersection, and they're going to come to a jury and or a settlement and state the reason my client was injured is because the town did not build a traffic signal. So that they're trying to give us a little guidance in regards to that. You know that it's warranted, and you know the reasons why. Put together a plan to build it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to point out that this is 90% paid for. The project design is 90% paid for. This is just to get that last 10%, or I guess 90% done. 5%. It's just that last 5%. So that being said, the money was approved by a previous council to do it, and there was an issue, and we needed to expand it a little bit. I feel like if we don't do it now and wait until we're actually in the need for a traffic light, $50,000, $100,000 just to finish the drawings, and that's assuming that we actually can get these people to finish it or get the drawings from them that are half done or 95% done. So I totally feel like we need to do this and just buck it up. However we messed up our count before, it happened. We need to get it done. That way we've got it. When we're ready to talk about it, the designs are in our hands, and then, because we've got Adaro Canyon's looking to expand at some point too. So I feel like we're going to need it sooner rather than later. So I would move to approve as written.
Madam Mayor, if I may make one more important comment about this. This was not finished in the year it was budgeted, which is what wasn't even last year. It's taken that long to get it back up here. The reason it wasn't is because the intersection sets at the top of a vertical curve, and each of the north and southbound legs are on a horizontal curve. So most traffic signals, the exception of those that belong to the Arizona Department of Transportation, have emergency vehicle detection devices. The intent for that, or the purpose, is that as the fire truck or the ambulance is approaching, it calls that signal with a flashing light. And depending on the programming, either turns it all red or turns the direction of travel green. Ours are green. In this particular case, we did not have enough distance. So it's taking additional measures to, one, pick up the light further away from the traffic signal prior to them getting to the curve. Once it reaches that, send it up the hill to the traffic signal. That took a considerable amount of time because we actually did real-time testing using our preemption devices, not only in the chief's truck, but the assistant chief's truck, and it just so happens the Public Works Director has one of the devices as well. But trying to get those little things, which are about 2 inches in diameter, at just the right angle and the right location, proved to be challenging. The good news is that we were able to accomplish that, and not only myself, but the engineering team and the town engineer are comfortable that that detection will work in the future when it's constructed. That's the primary reason we're this late, is because of that safety issue, which is critical.
Thank you.
I think everybody up here knows that I'm not in favor of this. Last November, December, and January of this year, I went through that intersection 8 times a day, and have documented the traffic flow, rush hour, non-rush hour, rush hour in the afternoon, and saw no more than 6 cars at any one point in time, and no pedestrians ever, and that's almost 3 months solid. Now, it's not a very professional traffic study, I know that. However, it's a big indication to me that this is a waste of money to finish this. We're not going to build it now, and if Adaro Canyon is going to expand, tell them to bring a checkbook to the table, please.
Was there a second on that motion?
I second it, but I'd also like to make a comment.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, I was on that road and I stopped at the stop sign. I was the 7th car back in both lanes. There were 8 trying to make a left-hand turn, and that was at 6:30 at night. Not even the busiest time. I have also seen a lot of people hiking and walking along Palisades Boulevard from Shea up past the stop sign there. So I know there are pedestrian traffic, pedestrian people walking and using that particular crosswalk. I've seen it. While I haven't sat there for 6 hours for 3 days or 3 months, I understand that these particular warrants that have been done have said that it's a safety issue and we should put a traffic light up there. So I'm going to second this and approve it, because I think as a town we're being proactive and realizing that that area is only going to get, it's already busy, it's only going to get busier with the hundreds of people that are going to move into Adaro Canyon once all those homes are complete. And in addition, on weekends, we have a ton of hikers going up there. So I'm for it. Thank you.
This is not a study, it's a design, right?
Correct.
It's the completion of a design that we will own after this.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember McMahon. Aye. Councilmember Friedel.
Nay.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Nay.
Councilmember Toth.
Nay.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Justin, for all your work and for tonight. Our last item says possible action, but probably isn't, is talking about the new laws that passed in the legislature. Some of them do affect us, of course. And while we were talking about it, I also want to, there's a copy of the resolutions that are the legislative agenda that was adopted by the various committees that many of you are on, and I appreciate that. So I was going to read through them, but I won't, because you have them, and I'm sure that there were a couple that just I wondered about, which was a temporary property reclassification for redevelopment projects. So I just ask you to please look at them. They're all explained on the league website, and if you have any issues with any of them, to please let me know, because I'll be voting on this on the 29th at the league, at the resolutions committee. The other thing is, as far as the laws that passed, you talked about Prop 400, so thanks for that. We are facing that rental tax repeal, which is over $650,000 per year, every year, to our town, which could get higher based on, rents and such. So we did meet with the governor, the league, and we're talking with, the legislature to try to figure out if there's going to be a way, because that is for us, it's like 3.2% of all of our TPT, a little less than 3% of our whole general fund, not, including capital. So hopefully there'll be some options and things discussed to try and help with that, because for some cities it was a big chunk of their actual budgets. One law that passed that I'm going to have to ask staff and Aaron to get to help is called Zoning Ordinances, Property Rights Costs, and requires a municipal governing body to consider a housing impact statement prior to adopting any zoning ordinance or amendment. So it sounds like it might mean a lot, but we'll hear about that. There's also one about consumer fireworks. So there's a whole bunch of them, but that one is going to be something that I think is permissible for us to allow fireworks on, let's see, right now they're allowed between December 24th and January 3rd, and this would make it December 26th and January 4th. So I think there's a story behind that I don't remember. I know there was another thing in there that we might not want to do, so just take a look at that. And then also there's an article in here about the Prop 400 for you to take a look at. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Just a couple quick ones. That HB 2485 about ambushing police sentencing enhancements. Just 2 additional years, I think that's too little. And also the exception is for the earned early release credits. I think those 2 years, if it is going to be a minimum of 2 years, they should be hard time 2 years. They shouldn't get early release on those additional 2 years. That's a shame. SB 1068, police dogs, emergency treatment, requiring an ambulance to take a wounded dog that was wounded in the field to a veterinarian hospital. I think that's really excellent. They're heroes. And then lastly, as a best friend of mine who happens to be a former 911 dispatch operator, HB 2717, trauma counseling. 911 dispatch operators expands a traumatic event counseling program available to public safety employees, peace officers, firefighters, to include 911 dispatchers. 911 dispatchers literally sit for 8 hours a day and live through the people's worst days of their life. The stories are horrific. It's not for everybody. It's a terrifying job. And so I'm glad they're going to be qualified for counseling services.
Any discussion on anything? Okay. Our next, so council discussion direction, I just kind of wanted to ask about that flagpole. So if you can kind of look into that, I appreciate that. Is there anything else mentioned that anybody would like to have follow-up on? Any future agenda items?
Well, I've got something for the manager, and I do have a couple agenda items. I did email Rachel about the flagpole, but considering all the tragedy in Hawaii, I would love to have a presentation on where we are with emergency services. So, what is the policy for using the sirens? What is the plan if there's a power outage? What is the plan if there's a water pressure issue? Things like that. So everything that went wrong in Maui, I'd love to have a plan and a solution so that we don't ever have to have that kind of conversations. And I know that might take a little time, and I understand.
Would that be along the line of the emergency response that we have, the booklet? But I know we can't talk about a lot of that in public, but you can have, you can get it. But
well, the public, should know the policy for
some of that.
If the power goes out, right? Or when do the alarms, what criteria has to be met for those alarms? I don't know. Do we have a emergency robocall feature and text message stuff like that? Like when are those used? And then maybe because that's a policy decision, maybe we want it to be in other situations too.
Sure. What we can do is we'll put together a presentation that kind of covers some of that. Some of it is, confidential in terms of, emergency planning, in terms of what would we do if there was an active shooter, or what would we do if there was other things like that. Those tend to be more confidential in nature, but we can certainly put together something in the public interest to present.
Great.
Along with the Hawaii issue, I was talking with Justin probably 2 weeks ago. I think we need to take a look at adding on some footage to properties, especially like up in Eagle's Nest where they're doing a lot of building right now. I think we go 5 feet. We need to extend that to what the county does, which is 10 feet. There's been 3 fires up there already. All we need is 1 more. There's a lot of construction. Sparks are flying from iron workers up there and from landscapers and other things. So I see that as a big risk to the town. So I'd like to know if we could take a look at amending our code to involve that. And then an add-on for a future agenda item. I think we need to revisit detox home inspections. I think the state of Arizona now allows for local municipalities to do some type of inspections, and I think Phoenix is doing it, and also Glendale. Can we look into that? And then I want to know if we can bring back the prohibited solicitation with the amendments that were talked about here tonight as another future agenda item.
Absent any objection, I don't have an issue. Rachel?
I don't know. Do we need 3 to do it?
Well, my view is that we heard a lot of discussion and direction, at least on the solicitation issue tonight. It sounds like there's an appetite to entertain that again. But ultimately, Mayor, if you're okay with those appearing, if we have to have 3, what's the pleasure?
I don't mind. I mean, I'm okay with looking at them, of course. I'm not sure how we can change that solicitation one, but, this is where, if it ends up coming back that it still has the same issues that it did before, but, we can always consider that. And the detox thing, that was a state law, so go in to check that out and see how that changed, but yeah. And then were you talking about setbacks?
Yeah, setbacks and from property lines, and also the homes that are under construction. That fence that goes around there, they can only go 5 feet to clear vegetation. There's been a tremendous amount of growth and vegetation up there. The county right now is 10 feet. Why can't we match what the county does?
Sure. Yeah, we can look into that and make sure that we have some parity there. Regarding the detox, if I recall, I think when I took a quick glance through the league's sessions, I think there is one on detox, so there may be some updates there, and then we can reconvene to see if there's more steps we can take.
And if need be, I would second the solicitation ordinance, the changes. So if we need 2 seconds, I'll be one of them. And then I've got 2 here. Is one, since the state has changed the law on the regressive rental tax, we do need to change the ordinance. I mean, it doesn't apply for a couple of years, but I would like to put that on an agenda and have a vote on that. I don't know if we need seconds for that or not, but that's something we need to change anyways. And then the other one is that for the group homes, I do want to make a motion, and I don't know if I need seconds or not, to add liability insurance for group homes. And I've got language. So it's real simple.
The one about wait, what was the first one you just said? The one before the
repeal the rental tax.
Okay, that one is just a natural thing that we do when we get a new state law. right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I mean, when it comes through, we can vote on it, but we have to comply with the state law.
Yeah,
but,
we
you
just
know.
make routine changes. They do changes to the model city tax code, and so it happens through the normal process.
Yeah, and we'll get that. And then does everybody want, do two other people want to talk about the insurance thing with group homes?
Yeah, I would.
Yep, I'll be number 3.
Okay.
No, I'd actually like to discuss it. The insurance requirement for group homes was already brought up and dealt with in executive session. Do you recall?
Do I recall? I'm trying to remember if I recall. Yes, I do recall that we had that discussion.
Yes.
Yes.
So you want to have it talk about it again?
No.
Oh.
No,
It's been resolved.
and we've already talked about that, and we can't force them to have insurance, is what I thought the conclusion was, and we've already discussed it.
Yeah.
Let me just go ahead and take a look at what we've actually put into our code, and then go ahead and circle back, because I understand the desire of 3 members is to at least.
It's all 2 right now.
Oh, it's only 2 right now. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, look at it.
Okay, we're
Okay.
going to talk about that again.
Okay.
All right, are we done? Anything else? We're adjourned. Thank you.